as well.
Okay. We're back on the record. Item number 19, 27113 BC, 129 Norfolk Street, Brooklyn.
Hello, good afternoon again. Eric Palatnik. We attended your review session yesterday and we heard your board's comments, but I think it might be, I was a little confused about what exactly the comments were, so maybe it might be best if the board outlines for me what your issues are. And we've prepared some documents to respond to what I think are the issues, but I don't want to misguess on what they were. I believe one of them was in relation to the easy one, was a 5-foot side yard was requested, I believe, on the northerly side of the home. I think that Commissioner Hinkson had requested it.
I did, and your response to me was that structurally it would be impossible. However, you're actually moving the wall already. You're moving it from a 3-foot 9-inch position to a 4-foot and change and 3-inch position. And so my question is, if you're going to move that wall, why didn't you give us a complying side yard?
The northerly side yard, the wall I think is maintained where I don't believe it's moving, but I'll talk to the architect, and I know that was your example.
And perhaps maybe maybe he didn't realize which wall I was talking about.
I assume you're talking about the northerly.
There's a discrepancy between, I think, maybe what your papers actually say and the plan. So maybe there's a problem there. But if you are moving the wall, and that prompted me to say, well, if you're moving that wall, why wouldn't you move it and make it a complying?
Let me speak to the architect again. We did speak. The only thing we're moving on the northerly side of the home is we're removing that illegal 1-story portion of the home. But the wall itself, I don't believe, is being relocated at all on that side of the home.
Then maybe you could actually look through your papers and clarify what exactly is the side yard there. Because it just didn't make sense to me that you would tell me one thing, show me another, and then say, well, I can't give you a
There's obviously a
compliant side yard.
miscommunication. I spoke at length with Joel Mealy, the project architect, about it, and he assured me up and down that wall, to move it out even a few inches, to move it in even a few inches would take it off of the supporting wall below it, and he didn't indicate that the wall below it is moving.
He's moving it. I mean, it shows it on his plan, that he's moved it from what the original was. And I think it's also on your existing plan.
I will have a conversation with him and I'll confirm, and we'll get the report back to the board.
You want to know what else we discussed?
That would be wonderful.
I believe that the chair had questions concerning the higher base plane.
Yes, about the mitigating factors that you're required to mitigate.
Yes.
When the base plane's higher than 9 feet, you're required to mitigate in 2 ways, and you're only in 1 way.
I'm learning about this as well, as the board is learning about it. I'll pass up a package, and right on the front of the package that I'm passing up, you'll see a circled part, and the second page is a second circle. I learned yesterday also, and we're all learning about the flood programs. If you look at page 2, the second page where I circled it, it states that roofed porches, the sentence starts where I circled, open porches shall count as 1 mitigating element and roofed porches shall count as 2 mitigating elements. Mm-hmm. In this home, there's a proposed roof porch. So where the architect was suggesting was that he was using that, utilizing that.
Where is the roof porch? Yeah, where's the roof porch? Has to be within 25 on the bedroom.
Henry, you're going to post that. It's shown on the rear, the Norfolk side street of the home, at the front of the home, on the plan sheet A106, sheet 6 of 28. And of course, it's a relatively new regulation, so everybody's just coming up to speed with it.
Sorry, that's the rear yard, isn't it?
No, on the Norfolk Street side, no.
Kevin, give me that.
If I can.
Does the plan?
This is Kensington Street.
Yeah, that's Commissioner's got something else.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, no, the rest, the handouts are together with a bunch of other items that I think you had raised, so I was going
I
to address
see.
them.
Oh,
It was only the
okay.
first two, and that
Okay,
was
so
irrelevant, I apologize.
You're saying that the Norfolk Street side has
Has a porch,
a
which is-
porch that is roofed.
Right, and I believe Mr. Mealy had met with the Commissioner at the Department of Buildings to make sure that that would pass muster, and was advised that it would, but I can
It's a
give you,
trellis?
I can give you more information on
It's
that.
a trellis. I'm not sure that that actually qualifies as the roof structure.
Mr. Mealy had advised that he had met with the Commissioner, and they had said that they would accept that. I'd be happy to
I
get
think
some
you're
more
going to have to
confirmation.
get that in writing from DOB,
We'd be happy
that
to.
that qualifies under the section, because it's not what I think most of us would consider a roofed porch.
I understand. We'll go back to the Department of Buildings, and we'll give you some information to support that.
It's pretty much an open porch.
As I said, it was presented,
You've got
it was
like
presented to the...
24 inches between
Oh, I
those
see.
beams. That's
Trellis,
pretty
yeah.
much an open porch.
Yeah.
Instead of a culvert.
So, yeah.
I mean, there's no reason why it couldn't be designed as a roofed porch, right?
As I said, the design was brought before the Commissioner of the Department of Buildings and discussed with him, and that's how the architect came to the conclusion that it would satisfy the requirement. But I understand you don't have that
I think
information.
you're gonna
Now that you're raising the
get that
question,
to us.
we'll bring it back to them to give you the...
Oh, wait a second, wasn't there a later submission where it's showing also the ground sloping up? No?
I'm not sure. I don't believe so.
Later submission.
I'll show it in the section.
I don't have access to that.
The landscape in this community is relatively flat.
No, but one of the mitigating factors is that you slope the landscaping up towards the building. Here's the submission from Friday. Sorry, kind of still in a little bit low-tech mode here.
No, that's okay. I'm
High
looking
tech,
back
okay.
into the original filing now while you're talking.
I think this is the original.
That's the original, so there was a later submission. Submitted on September 5th.
Now, that's the plans that you should have in front of you there.
This is the latest set.
That's the latest set of plans.
Okay. So,
And I'm just looking at the originals. I don't see the original filing.
so your section shows that you've got, your elevation is pretty much the same on your rear yard as in your front yard. Your right? So you
Correct.
you have not sloped.
No, we have not
Not
sloped.
on that one, no. Okay.
But
So-
we'll find out for you. I understand what your board's concern is, and of course, we would have to comply with the regulation and to the satisfaction of the Department of Buildings and of course to your board. So we'll vet it out a little further at the Department of Buildings and give you something in writing.
Okay. Okay, so that was,
Thank you, sir. Oh, wait, I do have an extra set. I do have an extra set.
Hold on. The chainsaw.
just 1 second. Okay,
Wait. Sorry, Madam Clerk.
It's fine.
You go?
there you go. Okay, so we just need an answer on the roof porch situation. So when would you, what's this is the one, not this one. Okay. This one has an 8-foot room wall, right? This one has the 8-foot sewer easement. Oh, yeah. So, okay, there was just one other thing. Now I need to go to the plans again. Sorry. When you look at this house adjacent to its neighbors, now that it's lifted up on stilts, right? Even though it's still within the 35-foot height limit, it's a big house now. I mean, it's towering, right? So, pretty towering, right? So, and if you look at what the attic plan looks like, there's a lot in that attic area that's not utilized. So, in the interest of reducing the apparent massing, because there's nothing to be done about the fact that you have to raise it up to deal with floodplain, since most of the attic is actually sort of fluff, the attic really needs to be reduced to the place where there isn't any occupiable space in the attic. There isn't already occupiable space outside of that 1/3, so that portion of the attic needs to be redesigned so that you don't get such a massive thing. I mean, it really is reading like it's towering over the neighborhood.
Like that, we'd like to discuss with the board. Unfortunately, we are not so inclined on that one to necessarily agree with the position the board is taking. Simply because you see this in the newspapers all over the place. I happened to be out in Fire Island over the summer. It's a hard-hit flood community, in the Rockaways as well. And the houses are being lifted one by one, and they are going higher than everything around it. The articles in Newsday all summer long were in Oceanside and all along the shore of Long Island that people are upset that the houses are going higher. In the next 20 years, it's going to be the norm. You can't invest $1 million in this community and not raise the houses.
Right.
And you can't ask people who are already giving up their cellars in these homes, and these homes are for families. It's being designed for families with 3-4 children. And they're losing their cellars because of the flood regulations. They can't provide any storage of any substantial nature underneath their homes anymore because of the houses being lifted and their breakaway walls, and they're prone to moisture and they're prone to intrusions. They need a place to store things. They need a place for people to go. In this house, we are including in the attic level, there's living space in the attic level.
Not shown on this plan.
There should be, yes.
Shows a mechanical room.
You have my plan set, unfortunately, so I could take a look at that. I can point out to the board.
A108
attic plan.
He's showing the space as a mechanical room up there, but it's also really a playroom for the children, is what he's using it for as well. I mean, there's going to be mechanical things up there, and there's going to be, in addition to that, whatever's left is going to be for storage of household goods, which I'm sure we could all appreciate the amount of goods people have. But if you want past the needs of the family, in the package that is passed up to you should be
So, and so also with respect to that, the ground floor, which is, technically the cellar now, it's actually being shown as accessory storage, first of all.
It is being shown as accessory storage, but of course we all know that as soon as the storm hits, everything that's in that space will be destroyed. And there's no possible way that people can move out years' worth of household belongings in the 3 days prior to an evacuation in a danger zone that they're being ordered to evacuate in a matter of hours. It's unfair to ask people to live like that, and that's the concern that people are having. They're trying to work with the flood regulations. If I could also maybe give you a little bit more confidence in the decision, we could give you more information to support this even more. In the package I passed up to you are 3 other properties, 176 Oxford Street, 159 Exeter Street, and 177 Kensington, which are all homes that have been lifted. And they're homes that have been approved by the board already. Also, the Department of Buildings in the zoning resolution was explicit in promulgating the flood regulations that the homeowners weren't going to be penalized for raising their homes.
Right.
So in this instance, you're putting the homeowner in a position where if they want the space of lowering their home back down, which is, again, not what the city of New York is trying to request.
Well,
that
not
they do.
really, because they're asking to enlarge significantly the size of the house, right? So if we talk about a house that's really big in the neighborhood, there's got to be some kind of trade-off that it gets to kind of blow up, and then there's nothing to sort of calm it down a little bit. And if you just look at the design of it with these very big gables and the double super big gable, where you've got the finished ceiling height. See, it's actually not told. You have a ceiling height that's more than, it's about a 14-foot from floor to top of rafter. And if we're just talking about mechanical and storage, and I don't know about a playroom, really, it's not how it's shown in the drawings, but you're talking about mechanical and storage, you certainly don't need those kinds of ceiling heights. They could start the hip lower.
They can, but the extra 2 or 3 feet that you're trying to achieve here, I don't believe is going to have any noticeable effect. And at the end of the day, I'd like the chance to provide you with a survey, and a very conclusive, a very comprehensive survey of previous approvals by the board over the course of the past 2 years since Sandy.
No, but it's not about that. It's about the streetscape. You look at the proposed building, and you look at the adjoining properties, and you see proposed adjoining properties.
But those adjoining properties are obsolete.
They may be obsolete, but at the same time, you're asking for a special approval.
I understand.
And the special approval is asking for a lot more floor area, right?
We're asking for a floor area ratio correct. The correct floor area is 2,571 square feet, which is what we're asking for.
Right, so it's a significant amount more floor area than those so-called obsolete houses that are well within the maximum allowable floor area, right? So if you ask for something big, then at the same time, there needs to be something that mitigates.
But the big that we're asking for is not the height. The height is being promulgated by
Right.
the resiliency plan of the city of New York. It's not being
Right.
requested by the homeowner.
But the big that you're asking for is mass in this direction and in this direction. So to reduce the apparent mass in this direction and this direction, you make a very minimal effort to lower the hip point. I mean, if you just drop the hip point down by 3 or 4 feet, you'd still probably have your area in the roof. It's just a slightly different design.
It
And
does.
that's really all we're talking about.
It does. I understand that, and I can understand from your perspective of what you're asking for. And I know we're up here requesting something, and I mean no disrespect by disputing the point. But I feel strongly the day after Sandy hit, my first phone call was to my partners and colleagues and to the Board of Standards and Appeals and to the Department of Buildings that was saying that we have a problem here because these houses are going to be raised and there are going to be concerns as the houses get raised. And as I worked with the city through the promulgation of the resiliency program, it was abundantly made clear over and over and over again that nobody will be penalized for complying with the resiliency program. Now, I understand that they're asking for something, but what they're asking for over a period of time, as we're in an evolving city, is going to be the norm. There is nobody who's going to invest millions of dollars. These houses are selling, before they're even touched, they're selling for $1 million. So it's difficult to ask. My concern is setting a precedent of having a homeowner come in and ask for the space that they so desperately need and raise the home so that way they bring people out of harm's way and bring their lifetime investment out of harm's way, but be told that, you can't go up to the height. And I think the city was sensitive to that. They clearly said that when you raise the home, we're taking the height elevations from the base floodplain elevation. That's where we're measuring the height. We're not measuring it from grade anymore. And they made it, if I go through the testimony and the legislative history of the new laws that have been promulgated, I'm sure to find over and over again that this is not going to penalize you. And I know they're having an ask here, and I know that, but I don't think this house it's not a gargantuan house as compared to the other house in the neighborhood. And I think if I give you some information to show you other houses that have been lifted in the area, and to show you that there are houses sitting at that height, it's unfathomable to me as a planner, as somebody who works in the planning, I'm not a planner, but somebody who works in the planning industry, that this won't be the way the entire block looks like in 15 to 20 years.
The houses will be lifted, but they all won't be 1 plus FAR on the site. They'll still remain their diminutive scale.
Houses every house in the neighborhood is coming before the board every year. There's another 50 to 75 houses coming before the board. It's a matter of time before every house is impacted.
So in that case, maybe then that's an issue about what the height of the buildings are that are surrounding the houses that don't come before the board. I mean, you do need to look at neighborhood character here, right? That's one of the findings.
Of course.
Right? And so this is inconsistent with neighborhood character, but what I'm not understanding is, I mean, other than the fact that it means that your architect needs to go back and do a little design work, this is a very extreme pitch. It's actually one of the more extreme pitches that I've seen on a house. Most houses, the pitch is more like that, more gradual. This one pitches up very intentionally to hit the 35.
I'm going to ask him about that. I
If you
will.
just kind of lowered the pitch like that, you get down 4 feet, and you haven't touched the floor area. There's no deprivation on the part
I
of...
understand. I'll talk to the architect about lowering it, but on a larger discussion point, and particularly on this case, I will provide you with photographs of other homes in the community that have similar roof lines to this, so that you could see the other homes that are there. But I do feel that it's a big ask of these homeowners. They are losing precious space at the storage space down at the ground floor, and they're losing precious recreation space and mechanical space. And every inch counts. These are for families, and that was the purpose of the special permit, was to accommodate the families. But I understand your concern, and I know what your goal is. I'll just finish with the final thing when it comes to the character discussion. You're raising the character discussion. The zoning resolution permits the height. The planning department of the city of New York determined that a building that's exactly as I'm proposing to you, at the height it's at, is fully compliant with zoning. And they determined it fits within the character of the area. It's almost a prima facie evidence that it fits within the character. Now, I understand your argument that we're enlarging the house horizontally, but I don't necessarily agree with the fact that just because it's a horizontal enlargement, that lowering the height of the roof will necessarily mitigate it. Maybe it will a little bit.
If you look at the streetscape, you'll see that it would. But by the way, you know well that the board has often not looked at, in terms of neighborhood character, what zoning allows, but what the character is. That's the finding, not what zoning allows, but what the character is, right? The current character, not some projected future character.
No, I disagree. I believe that when it comes time to analyze character in the zoning, pursuant to the zoning resolution, that the character that's allowed is the character that should be analyzed is the character designed by the planning division, the division with the expertise of the city of New York, that's created a vision for what the character should be. The fact that not everybody on the block has decided to do their enlargements yet to their permitted sizes shouldn't necessarily be to their detriment. There are many. This is a bungalow. It started off 175 years ago with a hotel on this peninsula with bungalows around it. And that's a lot of the small homes that are left. And they're not staying, they're going one by one. A lot of houses there aren't even occupied anymore because they got hit by Sandy. So I understand what you're saying, and I don't want to pontificate on the point too much more because I know I'm babbling. But we would like the chance to give you a little more information, and I will talk to the architect and see if it's feasible to lower the few feet that you're requesting. And we can do that, but I can't promise you that I'm going to come back and agree.
Give it a college try.
Give it the college try.
How much time do you need? Are there speakers on this item?
We could submit back to the board in 2 weeks. Hopefully we can get something from Department of Buildings by then as well. So
So
2
on the
weeks.
23rd?
I'm sorry, I just caught something.
Uh-oh.
I know, I'm sorry. Just ask the architect to please check his building height across all of his sections and make sure that if he's starting at his base plane, which he's saying is 1310 from 0, I'm assuming, then if he's saying that he's got a 35-foot building height, then his elevation should be somewhere about 48 feet and not 55 plus, which he has on a couple of other sections. If he could just tell me how he got to 55 from 0 as opposed to 48 from 0. That would be good.
I will clarify that, please.
Okay, so then submission on the 23rd, is that good?
That's great, thank you.
Okay, and hearing on the 7th then.
Thank you.
Is that good?
That's fantastic, thank you.
Next item is item number 10, 32713 BZ, 1504 Coney Island Avenue, Brooklyn. Oh, Mr. Goldman, no?
Ready? Okay. Good afternoon. I'm Howard Goldman. I'm representing the applicant. Just real briefly, this is an application for a special permit under ZR 7344 to reduce the parking requirement for ambulatory medical use. The requirement is one space per 400 square feet, and this application seeks a reduction to one space per 800 square feet. The medical use is within a mixed-use building that also includes use group 10 retail, use group 6 retail, a very small amount of office space, use group 6B office space, and nonprofit without sleeping accommodation. So this is one of 4 uses in the proposed building. But for the proposed parking reduction, the building is as of right in all respects. The use is as of right, the bulk is as of right, and we're not seeking any reductions for any of the other uses for parking purposes. It's limited to the medical facility, and I think there's 3 or 4 spaces for the office space, but the large majority is for the medical facility, which is what the zoning resolution allows the board to waive. If the waiver is granted, we would go from 346 required spaces to 272 required spaces, which is a reduction of 74 spaces. Interestingly, this section 7344, there are no findings in that section. So we fall back on the general findings that are applicable to all special permits. And those basically boil down to effects on the community and impacts on any public improvement projects. So there are no public improvement projects, so the only real finding has to do with how this impacts the community. I want to make 3 general points. I know the board had a number of specific questions yesterday, all of which we're prepared to address, but just some overall points. When I started with city planning in the early 1980s, there was a raging debate going on about parking and parking policy in the city. And on the one hand, there was the parking industry and many of the community boards which thought that parking should be encouraged, parking spaces should be encouraged. On the other hand, we had environmental groups, as well as most of the planning community, which said that, well, wait a minute, we want to discourage parking, we want to discourage auto use, we want to encourage mass transit use. And that debate played out in the Midtown zoning, which was adopted in 1982, which took away all the parking requirements within the Midtown Special District. That issue is still alive because just the other day, Carl Weisbrod was speaking at a breakfast, and he said that one of the ways in which the administration is going to be encouraging affordable housing is to drastically reduce the parking requirements associated with housing in appropriate places. And by appropriate places, he meant where there are mass transit alternatives to parking. So I believe this application, as a general matter, is consistent with the city's policy with respect to not encouraging more parking, but rather trying to encourage the use of mass transit. Mass transit is readily available here. The Q train is within easy walking distance, and there are very good bus routes on Coney Island Avenue. So there is mass transit at this location. So that's my first point. Second point has to do with the supermarket, which is located across the street. And I just want to clarify, that's not part of the application. The supermarket became relevant because many people in the community said the supermarket causes traffic congestion because it doesn't have adequate parking across the street. And I think that's probably true, because it's a 26,000 square foot supermarket at the parking ratio of 1 per 300 square feet. It should have 87 spaces, but in fact, its certificate of occupancy only shows 29 spaces. I don't know why or how or what the history of that is, but the C of O calls for 29, and I believe that they do provide 29. So that's not part of our project in any sense. I thought that if we had an excess of spaces in our garage at certain times when that supermarket is very busy, which is basically before the Sabbath, that some of those unused spaces could be made available to alleviate some of the demand generated by the supermarket. I think that's permitted by zoning because even though our garage will be accessory, zoning defines accessory as primarily for the primary use, not exclusively. So to the extent we have vacant spots, and we believe we will, we thought it would be helpful to the community and a gesture of goodwill to point out that those spots could be used to alleviate the existing conditions due to the supermarket. So that's point 2. Point 3 has to do with the community board itself. I believe there was a misunderstanding at the community board as to what we were asking for. A number of people, we found out afterwards, thought that the parking reduction being requested was not from the 346 required to 272 spaces, but from 272 spaces down. And that's not the case. The request is to go to 272 spaces, not to further reduce it. And in fact, when this fact became known within the community, we were able to generate and submit to the board a fair number of letters of support from residents, local businesses, local property owners in support of this application. We offered to go back and to explain it to the community board, but they were not receptive to that, so we have not gone back. Okay, so in terms of the specific questions raised by the board, one question had to do with, can you provide another level of parking? They're not stackers in the garage. Technically, this is an automated system that uses pallets, and the pallets, there's 2 levels where the cars are stored, but it's the same difference. Can you provide another level of storage? And the answer to that is that the current excavation goes right down to water at about 30 feet below grade. We would need an extra 8 feet of excavation in order to provide an additional level of storage. And going into the water would be a very expensive and undesirable situation for the project. The second question was, how did you generate the parking demand for the project? Where did this come from? Jim Heineman, Equity Environmental, is our environmental and traffic transportation consultant. He can explain this in more detail if you like. We submitted, the papers are in our various application submissions to the board, but basically the basis is the Institute of Traffic Engineers, demand tables, which are recognized in SEQR as authoritative. And then because ITE deals with the suburbs and it's virtually 100% auto usage, then those figures are adjusted for city conditions. And specifically, Jim adjusted them based on the FEIS prepared for the Coney Island rezoning, which he actually worked on, so is quite familiar with. So that's where our projections of parking demand came from. The supermarket we discussed. The question was raised about another location, another building at 6010 Bay Parkway, which we reported was at only 70% occupancy with an entire parking level unused. The building manager, who Jim has spoken to, said they have more than enough parking, and even though they're not at 100% capacity, admitted they're at about 70-odd%, that he believes there will be more than enough parking when they are at 100%. Now, this is not like apples to apples strictly for our project, because that is medical use only, and we're a mixed-use building, so it's not directly comparable. But that's in answer to the board's question. With respect to the department store, the question was, well, what if there's more demand for the use group 10 than is projected? What happens then? The answer is basically that we are meeting the zoning requirement for the use group 10 uses. We are not asking for any waivers for use group 10. We're providing 100% of what the zoning requires, and we think that will be sufficient for that use. There were questions about other retail facilities at TJ Maxx, at East 15th Street, Marshall's on Avenue Y. We can survey these facilities if the board likes. We're happy to do that. But, those are both distinguishable from our situation in terms of the uses that are in the buildings. And I don't know that they would be terribly useful for this discussion.
Sorry, why are they distinguishable?
Let's see. Jim, come up. Oh, I've got it. The TJ Maxx is a public parking garage, not an accessory garage. The TJ Maxx spaces are provided within the public garage, which zoning allows, but it is also open to the general public. It also replaces a municipal parking lot and replaces the capacity that was generated or that the lot fulfilled. So I think it's different than an accessory garage, an exclusively accessory garage. The Marshalls is a standalone retail facility. There's no mixed use in that facility. So again, it's distinguishable from what this project proposes.
Except to say that the issue is the Marshalls generates X amount of parking, there's a parking garage, is the parking garage empty, right? Or does it have, some equivalent of 25% of the space is empty, right?
Yeah, I mean, which is something we can look at. We can look at that. The real distinction is that in a mixed-use facility such as ours, each of the uses has different peak times. So it's the combination of the uses that makes it possible to have excess spaces at certain times. That's unique to this project. That's the point of that. I think those are the questions we heard at review session. We'd be happy to, discuss them.
One of the things, the drawings don't show how the platform system actually works for it. Can you give us more information on that? Because, are stacking systems available that take up less height so that you wouldn't have to do so much excavating to hit the water? Also, we don't have any engineering information that you have water at that level.
We are prepared, we have that data compiled since yesterday, and we are prepared to submit it shortly after the hearing. The architect is here, he's familiar with the system, and maybe he could briefly address that. Colin?
But before
Yeah.
you do that, so the fact is, though, the way I understand it from especially the commissioners who actually were at the site and drove there, that there is an enormous traffic problem there. And so the concern is that this will add to the traffic problem as opposed to alleviate it, right? And so you're asking for a waiver where there's clearly a problem about parking in this neighborhood. So what we really need to establish clearly is that even though you came to the nuisance, sort of, right? You're coming here, you're not providing the minimum amount of parking required, and now you have triple parking and all of that sort of stuff at an adjacent facility. So you really do need to address the adjacent facility because it's causing traffic tie-ups and will cause traffic tie-ups into your own facility, right?
And we think we are by providing 70-odd unused spaces that would be available for their use.
But so that's the point, is that it needs to be, the study needs to be very clear that, for example, that site on Bay Parkway, that it operates with vacancies on a regular basis, and that there's similarity to your use. And if it isn't similar to your use, because you said that's strictly medical as opposed to a mix,
Yeah.
then you really do need to look at other places that have that kind of mix, so you can see whether that amount of spaces stays empty during those peak periods where the pomegranate store is also at a peak period, right?
You're basically asking for comparables,
Yes,
right?
right.
In the
Comparable conditions.
comparable conditions as opposed to
Yes.
comparable sales, but it's the same theory.
Right, right.
I mean, we can try to find comparables. I don't know if they exist or not, but we're happy to
It could
look.
also be adjacent uses, you know, in other words, right,
With the shared parking
for the
lot.
shared parking, right.
Okay. Yep, we're happy to do that work.
So if you wanted to, anybody have a question?
Well,
Howard?
I just wanted to say a little bit more about my question, because my question was kind of partially addressed by what you had said. It really had to do with, it came down to one of your final sentences when you said what makes this work in a mixed-use development is the fact that your peak periods are coming in at different times.
Right.
And although you are basing part of it on 60-10, you can only base one portion of it really on 60-10. It really is a matter of assumptions as to when all of these peak periods are going to hit. So the reason why I was asking about comparables in terms of different destination retail spaces is if your assumptions are wrong and these peak periods hit more closely together, creating a greater demand at any one time, I want to know if you are providing enough spaces, yes, as per the zoning resolution, but to take care of that excess demand. So that's why we were saying, well, if you could look at different destination retail, just to see what the actual usage is versus what's being provided, then that can give us a level of comfort that, okay, if you're slightly off and all these peak periods hit at the same time, generally in this area, destination retail only uses 75% of the parking that's being offered. So that gives you a little bit more to play with. That's basically where we were coming from.
That's clear. That's very clear. The only thing I would add is that the real peak period of concern is Friday and I think Thursday night as well. That's what we'll be focusing on because that's when the shopping gets done for the weekend. So that's our real peak period for neighborhood traffic.
But we also need to see that there's been a study of the other days, because clearly, let's just say Friday afternoon isn't necessarily peak period in the neighborhood for medical facilities, right?
Mhm.
But on the other hand, there might be other kinds of not as peak periods where it is peak for the medical facilities, but it's not as peak for the food store, but nevertheless, there's real activity at the food store, right?
Yeah.
So there should be a study over more than one segment of the week and of the day.
So if I understand, to boil all this down, we're following the zoning for the other uses, except for the medical. We're following the environmental, the seeker requirements, but the board wants us to dig further
Yes.
and look at actual field conditions to support the data.
Right, you're doing real car counts, right, because that's going to the neighborhood character question, not the seeker question.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. You want,
Is there anybody else? Did you want to say?
Just a couple.
Go ahead, Jim Heineman.
If I may, James Hyman, Equity Environmental Engineering. In response to some of the issues that you raised, I guess my concern is really addressing this, the issue of traffic. I mean, the extent to which our project generates traffic is really a function of the uses, which are as of right per the zoning. And if anything, I think as Mr. Goldman alluded to earlier, to the extent that parking is available, people may make the choice to drive. If parking is less available, people may use other options in an area where there are other options such as ours. So I'm not sure that the reduction in parking itself really relates to the traffic in the area. The issue obviously is, do we have enough parking on site to satisfy the demand for parking generated by the uses on our site? And I think that the point is well taken. We can certainly do an accumulation at the Marshall's in Sheepshead Bay. That's a standalone facility, so it'll be easy to see which, that the parking, the temporal distribution of that parking demand really is specific to the use group 10, whereas, the other one, the Kings Highway East 15th is, as was noted, it's also mixed-use building, not just TJ Maxx. There's also a community facility, Metropolitan Jewish Healthcare is there, and there's a New York Sports Club, and it's also a public parking lot, both for people who commute in from the Kings Highway Express subway station, as well as shopping and all the uses along Kings Highway which don't have parking, replace the public parking lot. So I think that Marshall's, the one in Sheepshead Bay, would be a worthwhile comparison. We can do some, hourly accumulation studies there. As far as the traffic, the traffic is generated by the uses in the building, and to the extent you were encouraged to use a different mode by the lack of availability of parking, not that we're trying to squeeze them in that direction, but if anything, our parking, the traffic generated by our project does not go up based on reducing the parking. If anything, it would go down. We think we're going to have enough that it won't be a deterrent. If people feel want to park in our facility, they will be able to. There should be spaces for them. But I understand what you're asking for. We'll also try to get some information. The other uses, one thing that the ITE, Institute of Traffic Engineers, parking studies do is they have a lot of data. And the data on the temporal distribution, hour by hour, for the retail uses is pretty consistent among their survey sites. And as Mr. Goldman mentioned, we did apply local information based on auto ownership and how people travel, so to make it more appropriate to an area which does have transit options and does have a fairly substantial community within walking distance. But I think I'm confident that their hourly breakdowns by peak demand are appropriate, but we can supplement that by some additional field research in this area of Brooklyn. We're happy to do that. And I can go into more detail about how we generate parking for each of the uses. We did that at the previous hearing. I don't know, I don't want to repeat myself and take more time, but certainly available to walk through to the extent that would be helpful.
Okay. I don't think we need it now. Thank you for
Thank
the
you.
offer. Yes. Yes, did you want to?
Thank you. My name is Aaron Malone. I'm the owner's rep at the project. I also live in that neighborhood on Avenue on East 35th for 42 years, and my office is a block away at 1404 Coney Island Avenue for the past 15 years. After the community board meeting, some of the people were concerned, reiterating what Howard Goldman said, but I went personally to the people who were concerned that we were reducing the amount of spaces from 272 to 170. The people heard 100. When I explained to them that we were only changing the use, but the amount of parking spaces were remaining because it's an automated parking system that was already built, they all signed a letter of endorsement. About 2.5 dozen shop owners, including the school, Pomegranate. The school owns the entire block between L&M, Pomegranate across the street, and most of the food establishments, the clothing stores, basically all the stores on Coney Island Avenue up to Avenue J, 2 blocks down, which I have copies of. And the parking, if I may go into the parking, the way it's built is that this is Coney Island Avenue, okay? This is Avenue K, this is Avenue L. We're at the corner of L. You're coming in to a ramp on Coney Island Avenue between K and L, and there is room for about 10 cars to be in the property, not double parked on the street, not lining up in the street. You're going into the ramp, about 10 cars, and then there are 3 turntables that take the cars down, and you just bring your car here, you put a credit card in, and it takes it by itself. And then when you come out, you're coming out to Avenue L. So you're not coming out the same, there's no gridlock. You're coming in on Coney Island Avenue, and you're coming out on Avenue L towards Ocean Parkway. So the way the system was built, the way it was designed, was to actually alleviate the congestion which exists right now with the building, without the building. The congestion exists all the way from Avenue J to Kings Highway, but this would actually alleviate some of the congestion there, and definitely would provide 272 parking spaces, is more than any building that size has on Coney Island Avenue.
Do you have an actual plan and section showing where the spaces actually are physically, so that we could see that you have 272 spaces?
I don't have it here, but we definitely do, because the system was already built. It's actually, we're 30 feet below grade level. Water is at 31. So actually the elevator pits are in water, but not the building. And it's the entire cellar, the entire sub-cellar is stacked up too high, but without anybody driving it there. The cars are parked actually 6 inches away from each other. We maximize the space by using the robotic system. So we do definitely have a plan. The system was already built. But I was just in simply explaining how it is, but we could definitely provide that to the board. And that's the reason, that's one of the reasons that we can provide more spaces, because it encompasses basically the entire to the subcellar, the 2 levels of the subcellar. Do you need this? Do you want to?
We'll submit.
And you'll submit it?
Yes.
That's fine.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
And is there someone else from the owner? Okay. Are there any people who'd like to speak on this item? No? Okay, so how much time do you need to put together those studies?
Doing the working with the marshals,
And also the other ambulatory care facility?
say 3 to 4 weeks.
It's making a month.
Okay, so... How about a submission on October 7th?
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yep.
And a hearing on the 21st?
Okay.
7th and 21st. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, and welcome to your new position.
Next item, item number 11, 17-14 BZ, 600 McDonald Avenue, Brooklyn.
No lip.
Okay.
Good afternoon. My name is Moshe Friedman. I'm the applicant for 600 McDonald Avenue. First of all, before we start, I would like to wish congratulations to the chair. May we have a long and fruitful relationship together here at the board, and I hope always to come to a consensus, which I find the best way with all our cases. A couple of things. We attended the hearing yesterday. I would just like to preface a couple of things. The Hasidic school system works differently than the standard school system that you may be familiar with. You have to look at an elementary school in the Hasidic world as one big, one-room schoolhouse. There's no such a thing as a separation even between the preschool, really, and the elementary and the middle school. That sort of doesn't... It's one administration. The girls have to work, the older girls with the younger girls. I cannot go ahead and take the middle school and put it in any other location. When a school gets too big for its location, at a certain point in time, they will not say, okay, let's move the middle school to someplace else. They will start with a new first grade in a walking distance and build up a whole new facility of the same type, which is why we have to keep this whole system together. If you look at the Vizhnitz dynasty, they have, I think, 2 schools in Borough Park, 1 school in Williamsburg. Satmar dynasty, the same idea. It's not an option to separate the school. The building is an existing building. It's about 500 feet long now. The extension will make it a little bit longer to the 600 feet. That in itself is also not an anomaly, because if we look at this is a city school, middle school 61 on Empire Boulevard is about 500 feet long. I only have the photograph over here, and this was built in the 1960s. I mean, just from the architecture, you see from the era that it was built. So that a long, narrow school is not an anomaly. The second thing I wanted to point out, because was brought up at the executive session yesterday, that the covered playground is also has been done. This is a picture of the Breuer's School in Manhattan on Bennett Avenue. I know that school intimately because my wife is an alma mater of that. It's her alma mater. This is built in order to have the preschool or a playground underneath the building where space is at a premium. Borough Park, space is at a premium. It's a very dense, high children ratio. If you look at the last hearing, I did speak about the census ratio. And what we have over here is, and the 2010, let's see, the 2010 census has 13.8% of the population is under 5 years old. There's an enormous explosion of need for classroom space. There's no room. We don't have, you cannot buy land. It's all, most of Borough Park was rebuilt already. You're talking about a high-density neighborhood, and you can't buy another piece. The only thing to do is to take the existing school and to go up. To that end, in the last submission, if we look at page 47, it's the color rendering, if you can see. We lowered the top floor. Everybody have it?
No, not yet.
Okay.
We're getting there.
Is it faster if I give you a copy?
Probably.
Yeah,
don't mind.
there we go, if you don't mind. I only have one copy.
Okay.
We lowered the top floor. That's I could make it a flat roof, but we made it a slanted roof because I think visually it's nicer. Because that's the hallway in the back of the gym. Where we didn't need the area, we lowered it as much as we could. So now we have on the top floor an 8-foot hallway, which is only going to 8 feet, but the gym area needs a higher space. As per request of the board at the last hearing, we saying that that page doesn't say on it, but we were proposing a finished block. We wish to take direction from the board, what the board actually wants. If we can come up, get an architectural designer, come a little bit more patterns in that wall to do. But remember, this is all about the children. They need the space. They're busting out of the space. And it's not the only school, I know, but this school is busting out, and we need the area. I have over here, I know you had some questions about the catering and other things. I have the school administrators here who would like to speak. And if you have any questions, then we'll continue.
Yeah, I have questions, but maybe after the school speaks.
There you go.
Please state your name for the record.
Okay, Honorable Commission. All I have to say is my name is Usher Ringel, Usheringel. I'm one of the administrators for the preschool and elementary school division. What we have is, as Mr. Frieden pointed out, an exponential explosion of children growing up in our institution. Right now what we have is, we have right now 6 parallel classes for the nursery and kindergarten. They're going to combine to 5, but the classroom might become enlarged with more students per classroom. But overall, we're going to have 5 parallel classes going up all through high school, and we just need the room, and that's why we have to build a little taller now.
So, where are the students now? The ones who are not in the school?
They are not in the school. All the students that we have are currently in the classrooms, but we're maxed out of space, so we're going to need more room. Eventually, next year, we're going to have them moving up another grade, another grade, another grade. we're gonna need those extra classrooms.
So it's not like you're consolidating from another school?
No, not at all.
So it's, you're anticipating them kind of
The
growing
growth.
up in place and staying in school? I guess my question, it might be for Mr. Friedman though, is what is the function of that space that's underneath the, how is this playground used that's underneath the elevated portion?
Well, it is, the preschool is on the first level. And instead of having the children climb all the way up to the roof, it's very hard to take 3-year-old, 4, whatever, you know, the young ages all the way up. That will be a play area for the preschool. And it's also being used for bus loading. On a rainy day, and actually I've been told by the clients that another yeshiva, I remember I did some work on it years ago because I'm an architect, architectural engineer, so we did plans where when you load out of the buses, you don't want the kids to get wet. So they're waiting outside, so a covered area is always useful. There's no other place to put it.
And I guess another part of my question is, how does this actually get designed? Are you ultimately the architect the engineer who's going to design the building?
Well, yeah, regarding the structural, we will have a structural engineer. That's up to the client if whatever we get at the board, if they'll hire me to go. But like I said, I know the board is very keen on the aesthetics. And I spoke to the rabbis, and we are going to call in an architectural designer to give a nicer facade in the front and in the back in order to... The building is what it was. It used to be a manufacturing facility, a floor was added, so, you know, certain things keep on. I know we're never going to get back to that era in the early 1900s, the late 1800s, where they built those grand buildings. I'm sorry about that. I love them. They're beautiful buildings, but the problem is there's no tax money in here. These are the parents' tuitions that are paying for this building. So yes, we would like to make it nicer, but there's a budget. So we're going to try and work within that to give at least a texture to the building and something nicer to make it an asset. You know, you have to remember that if you stand on Dale Road, all you're going to see now is the train rising up on McDonald Avenue. Right in front of this building is the train rising on McDonald Avenue, coming up to the elevated portion. That's not exactly your nicest picture. Actually, the building may serve the function of a noise buffer. So what can I tell you?
So I guess one of my questions, because the aesthetics matters to me a lot.
I
Because this is
understand.
a very permanent structure, and I hope, you know, you have great success with your school, so therefore you don't have to tear it down and do another one. So I do think that it's relevant for you to have the architect involved in the story now. And the issues, I mean, it's very interesting. I appreciate this one, but none of us would say that that was a great moment in
No,
construction.
exactly.
Right? So, whereas that's not bad, right?
Right.
And so, but one of the things that's about it is that it is physically divided into sections. And, but I doubt that the classrooms are divided. There's probably connections between them. So it's still one contiguous piece. It's just that you see it in sections. And I do appreciate that below you've got an existing building that's continuous up to the 500-foot mark, but you actually are adding 155 feet. That's not small, right? So there's an opportunity to, on the upper floors,
To create
really create separation and also to deal with the rear wall. So when you say finished block, that just frightens me, because finished block just makes me think of bad hospitals, bad public schools. So,
Well-
so it needs to be something where there's an architect involved who's really working on something that you'll be proud of. You'll be able to take pictures and it'll be on a brochure and everybody will be excited, and then so will we, right?
It'll help us
So-
collect money for the
Yes,
project.
exactly. There you go.
So yeah,
Fundraising.
we will. We're going to bring somebody in right now, and we'll come up with another something. We'll give some options to the board, which the board will be able to see whatever the board
Okay,
thinks
that's
like
great.
better.
And what about this issue about catering?
Currently, as the story is, there's the building that we're talking about, 600 McDonald Avenue. There's no catering. We have just the kitchen that services the school. In that building, we have no catering facility whatsoever.
Okay, so but you'll be willing to have a statement that we have on the resolution and a note on the certificate of occupancy that there's to be no catering in this facility, right?
And that'll make everybody happy.
That'll make people happier.
Happier.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. Are there any speakers on this item?
Yes.
Good afternoon, Your Honors. I'm Richard Class, attorney for Day Hill Realty, which is the adjoining property on the Day Hill Road section, I'll call it, behind this McDonald Avenue property. I sent the letter dated May 30th, which outlined a lot of the objections that my client has concerning the application that's submitted. And those were all raised at the hearing back in June. Since then, I also had submitted a correspondence report from my client's engineer, Oscar Lehman, which you have as well. The only additional submissions that I received from the applicant since that June hearing are these diagrams, which page 45 has the Day Hill Road elevation, and it basically shows a big, tall wall. And it's a question not only of the air, which was raised not by my client, by the neighbor who's here, who'll speak, by the engineer as to airflow. It also creates issues about actually sky view and also the sunlight. It's possible, based on how big a wall that looks like, and to me it looks like when you see on the highway one of those walls that's supposed to reduce noise. It looks like that, but in a residential neighborhood. I would not want to live there because I'd even be worried whether the sunlight's going to ever hit the street. The catering issue, I'll allow my client to address. Basically, my client disputes the statement that was just made, and the photographs which have been taken of the catering facility to Ferris Mordecai certainly shows a catering facility in use, and the fact that they're using the property from the Day Hill Road side, I think that you're missing a lot of the grander picture and grander scheme is how this affects the Day Hill Road side of the property. The McDonald Avenue side is, we'll call it sort of easy. In a sense, yes, there's a subway, that this is not an attractive street, but the other side presents a neighborhood. And destroying that neighborhood to create what might not even be necessary based upon the application and the documents and submissions so far, I think that the application is deficient in showing the impact upon the neighborhood, both the environmental study, the transportation study, and the direct effect upon the neighboring properties. With that, I'll allow my client to speak. Thank you, Your Honor.
My name is Joshua Lazarus from Day Hill Realty, LLC. The owners of the neighboring building to 317 Day Hill Road is where the school is, and it goes behind 600 McDonald Avenue, takes up that whole block behind us. That originally was a one-story manufacturing. They used to make plastic, the frames around from license plates, I believe. We were never notified that there was ever a hearing or anything, but somehow there's another, that was a concrete block, that's the back of the building. They built up another story, plain, unfinished concrete block, which at that time blocked a lot of light to our ground floor. Now they want to go up another 2 stories plus a playground, which will certainly impact us tremendously. We have 32 tenants that feel that they're going to be impacted. They're all very upset as far as blocking sunlight, sky view, air, which my engineer, Oscar Lehman, had testified to previously. Also, there's the wind factor, which will, big question if our chimney can last. But the school wants to wrap totally around us. They are wrapped around us. They just want to go up higher, way higher than what we are, 4 stories. They are not good neighbors. When they built the school, they did us tremendous damage. The property wasn't shored up. And we had basement floor totally broke up. The backyard totally broke up. The main structure of the whole building The beams twisted. They fought me in court on this. It went on for years. There was a judgment, $750,000, which was determined was the damage to us, but I never got my legal fees, which were over $225,000 to fight that in court. And today we continue to suffer. All the garbage, they have an entire block front on McDonald Avenue. Why is there garbage put out on Dayhill Road? It's right next to my building. There's a dumpster, smelly, full of garbage, because there's a catering facility which operates most nights of the week. I've been invited to weddings just recently in this catering facility, supposedly, which doesn't exist. It's one of the busiest catering facilities in the neighborhood. You can't park in the neighborhood. My tenants come home, they tell me if they're coming home at 9 o'clock, they'll sit in their car before 10, 10:30. They cannot get a parking spot until people that are coming to the weddings are leaving. The garbage, I believe, is from the catering hall. There's two garbage pickups. I quite don't understand it. There's one, they put a gate, and that's a garbage dumpster, which very foul-smelling garbage is there. I think that's from the catering hall. And then I believe it's the school garbage that goes right outside that on the sidewalk. When you walk on the sidewalk, you have to walk a very narrow path between all the garbage bags that are there and their garbage dumpster. People cross over the street not to walk over there. My tenants call me constantly. They can't keep their windows open that the smell is so bad. And this is what we deal with on a daily basis.
If you wrap up, that was the signal that.
Okay, all right. Again, I feel just because they say they have needs, I don't know if they have those needs or not, but they certainly chose a site that was much too small, and they want to keep on building and building. And because they have needs, it doesn't mean that the rest of us have to lay on the ground and be trampled on. Our property should be devalued.
I just have a question for you. You mentioned the catering. Is the catering actually in the building that in question that we're talking about, or do they have another facility that's adjacent?
The catering's at 600 McDonald Avenue,
So it's in this
right
building.
behind us, and they bring out their garbage. I mean, this is right next door to me. They put the sign, main entrance is on McDonald Avenue, not to use this entrance, which is right next door. But when the bands come, they stop on Dayhill Road. The band, they carry their equipment in, and all the garbage from 600 McDonald Avenue, I don't know why it's coming out on Dayhill Road. I don't know if it's intentional. And they have a whole block front, and they have a loading dock. No garbage is going out over there. No, there's nobody living over there. Everything is put out right next to us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, are there other speakers?
I'm sorry.
Please state your name for the record. You'll have 3 minutes.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Joseph Murata. I live at 351 Dahill Road, in the middle of the block between Avenue C and Catellia. And my property abuts this property, 640 McDonald Avenue. When I was a child, that was a vacant lot. There was no building there. That building was put up in the 1960s, the one-story building. In 1996, the gentleman who owned the building now went to the community board and requested a variance to put up a second story. It was unanimously rejected by Community Board 12 at the time, but down here at the Board of Standards and Appeals, they were given permission to put the building up, which they did. In constructing it, they dropped cement all over everybody's property on Dayhill Road. And when you yelled up to the workers that you have to do so, I had a brand new $3,000 roof on my garage that one half of it was covered with cement. And they would yell down to you in Russian that they didn't understand what you were saying. When I walked here today to come to this hearing, garbage collection on Dahill Road is on Saturday. There was still garbage and furniture on the sidewalk in front of the high school. The high school is where all of the supplies for the catering hall come in and go downstairs. As Joshua said, when they have bands come, they unload their musical equipment and go in through the Dahill roadside. The people on Avenue C constantly complain about double parked cars the valet service, parking cars all over the neighborhood, people coming out and feeling good from having a good time at an affair, and at 1 o'clock in the morning, they're out there yelling. And people are trying to get to sleep. It's not very easy. These are not good neighbors. 2 stories, a 3-foot parapet wall, and a 10-foot fence. I'm going to live in a canyon in back of my house. There are 25 houses on Dye Hill Road, the length of this property on Dye Hill Road. 6 across the street from me and 19 on the side that abuts the property. If this gets allowed to be built, all of those properties there are going to be in the dark. Dye Hill Road runs north and south. North is towards Greenwood Cemetery. The sun comes up in the west, in the east, is behind this building. Comes up in the east and travels all day long around to the west and go down. Nothing is going to grow in any of those backyards. Any people who have gardens and whatnot, they can forget about it. They're gone. So, in other words, for this to take place, and right now, probably about 60 to 70% of that building is used for catering. All of these people on Dye Hill Road, the quality of their life goes down the toilet so that they can build 2 more stories. One other thing, within 1 mile, there are probably 16 to 18 Hasidic schools, the majority of them girls' schools. There's 2 brand new, huge schools going up on 36th Street. 36th Street and 13th Avenue, and 36th Street and Church Avenue, 14th Avenue. 2 brand new huge schools. This property is not in Borough Park. This property is in Kensington. It's on the very border of Borough Park.
Could you wrap up that was a signal that your time is up.
These gentlemen tell you about the great increase. From what I say, there's about 130, 140 students go into that high school, and maybe 200, 220 go into the grade school around the corner. And with these other schools in Borough Park proper, I don't see that this school is going to grow that much in the next few years.
Thank you. Any other speakers on this?
Just for the record, the building on Day Hill Road is not the building in question over here. We're talking about 600 McDonald.
Right, so you're saying he's talking about a Day Hill Road school,
Right.
not your school?
Right.
And the catering
Yeah,
facility?
that is the high school facility.
The high school, okay. Is that related to you?
It's all one.
Please don't shout.
Is it, yes, please. He has the floor. Sorry, is that school, the one on Day Hill, is that related to yours?
It's under the same Hasidic umbrella, but it's the high, it is
the high
not,
school.
it's the high school. I have,
But is it a girls' high school?
Yes.
Is it part of the same, you're saying how the schools parts don't get separated?
yeah,
lower
the high
and
school
middle
does get separated. The
high school
elementary
is
is
separate.
separated. It's
Okay.
separate. There's only there's one entrance between the two, just for certain teachers who are the same, but it's not really connected.
So this is only lower and middle school, this
Right.
whole thing?
Correct.
Okay. And the high school is not proposing to grow, that's the high school.
When they need to grow,
They'll be back.
we'll be back. I mean, if we have to.
Okay. So can you speak to this issue? There's a few issues that were raised.
Yes.
Loading dock, trash, catering, messy
The tra-
construction, guys.
I cannot speak to the construction that happened in 1996.
Okay.
And,
So tell me about the loading dock. Is there a loading dock?
There is, for the 600 McDonald, all the garbage goes out on Dale Road, all the way on the other side. There's a little strip coming out, the tail. I'll have the administrator speak to
Oh,
you.
there's that little alley that's between,
Right, I actually have that neighbor, that neighbor is
oh,
here to
over
speak.
here, okay, to Day Hill.
Right, it's 15 feet wide, all the way then, that's the tail of the building. That's where the garbage is for this building.
So let's just say you have 1,500 kids, that's your projection, right?
Right.
With 1,500 kids, let's just say doing a lot of eating because they're kids, right?
Right.
how are you going to handle the garbage?
In that tail. That's why we left that, and we didn't build that up.
So you're saying that you're going to fill that up with garbage, though? I mean,
That's where the garbage is going to be stored till it's taken out to the street.
right, but you don't have like an enclosed space designed for this,
If the
for
board would
garbage.
like us, we can put in an enclosure.
Yeah, that definitely has to happen.
That's not that is not a problem.
Yeah, right, refrigerated, yeah.
Okay.
And in addition to which, where's all of the offloading and onloading of
Okay.
materials?
There. Okay, then one of the neighbors wants to speak.
I'm sorry. Good afternoon. My name is Abe Herbst, A-B-E-H-E-R-B-S-T, and I'm here as a neighbor. They're speaking about Dayhill Road. If there's any neighbor on Dayhill Road that's most affected by this, that would be us. I'm the board member and the administrator for Congregation of B'nai Torah. We have about 90 linear feet on Dayhill Road that abuts the property in question, and in fact, probably most of the horizontal extension is going to affect us and not anybody else. So I'm here as far as the neighbor is concerned.
Sorry, what's your address?
We have starting 363 Dayhill Road, 365 Dayhill Road, 369 Dayhill Road, 373 and 375 Dayhill Road.
Okay, well, this part at the bottom, okay.
Right. There's a map.
That's where the horizontal extension is,
Right.
not only the vertical.
That's correct. In addition to being neighbors, and there's an alley, there was a mention here of the 15-foot alley.
That's next to you.
That runs right, as a matter of fact, the rabbi sleeps right where the buses are. They were there first, we have no qualms about that, we accepted that. But I could say, when there is an issue regarding buses or anything else, these are very responsible neighbors, they're very responsive and responsible. We have who to talk to there. The buses are coming in and out, that's what it is. But if there's any issue with that, it's an immediate response. We can go out and we know the transportation manager, we can talk to him, he can take care of it immediately. So it's never been an issue where it hasn't been resolved immediately, and it's been smooth sailing. In fact, the school is a great asset to the neighborhood, because the alternative, if you go up and down McDonald and you look at all the other backyards, you would end up with cement factories that run 24 hours, or gas stations, or scrap yards. The school is basically the only domesticated, or civilized structure on the whole McDonald. And if anything, they could have ended up with a factory back there. And what would you have said then? The fact that there's a school there, and it's a great asset. In fact, the whole extension that they're talking about only affects the school. There was mention of other uses of the building, but the extension only affects the schools. And I can tell you, as far as the students are concerned, they are invisible to the neighbors of the community. The girls, if you have to see it for yourself, they don't even walk fast. They walk slowly. They don't need to speak loud. There's not a word spoken. It's basically invisible. If anything, it's beautiful to see in the morning how girls show up in uniform and they're marching to school. It's a very nice sight, and it shouldn't bother anybody. And I'm actually kind of bothered. People from the community might have an objection to that. I say the more the merrier. Bring it on. If you can let them go more, and the more girls they bring into the neighborhood, it just adds to the neighborhood.
Okay, thank you. Somebody else want to speak?
Good afternoon. My name is Pinkas Fasten. I'm a father of kids, which they started in 1987, 89, attending the school. And I have to thank you for approving the school many years ago for additional floor. I had 6 daughters graduated, and they went on to get some degrees. And I have still another daughter and grandchildren. They had space. You guys approved them space. They had space, 20, 22 kids in a room. Now my daughter is about 16 years. There's 28 to 30 kids in the school. I don't think so it's fair. And that's why they need the space. And that's it. I hope you can approve it.
Thank you.
So my grandchildren are going to have spacious rooms. And about destroying a neighborhood, it's the worst thing when kids don't have a way to attend school. That destroys a neighborhood.
Thank you.
The high, the high,
You already,
Sorry, you
you
can't
already
speak again.
spoke, yeah, I'm sorry,
the
you
high,
already
the high
spoke.
school is
Sorry,
317 Day
You
Hill.
already spoke.
Sir,
Could you sit down,
let's
please,
have
and let
people who
some
have
other
not
people
spoken.
who haven't spoken yet?
If you have any more questions for the administrator of the school, I can put it back on, or...
Yeah, so the questions were the trash issues we just discussed.
Right.
The other question that I had was about loading and offloading, like all the food and everything that gets delivered for the school. Where does that take place? Do you have a loading dock?
There's no official loading dock. There's a huge main entrance, and the crossroads that I would say about 20 feet, or probably even more. Crossroads, the gate opens up in front about 20-something feet, and then there's two huge doors, probably 15 feet wide in that area, 12 feet, and that's where the loading and unloading takes
And
place.
that's on the McDonald's side?
On the Day Hill Road side.
Oh, it's also on the Day Hill.
Where the garbage comes out,
Where the garbage comes out.
So if I'm understanding this, McDonald Avenue really is the manufacturing district. I mean, I know that the
Right.
zoning lot boundary,
Right.
zoning district boundary goes down the center, but really effectively, you got a commercial road there. You're basically putting all of that heavy stuff, trash, loading, and everything on the R6 in the residential
Well,
district, right? Or R6, R5?
It's again, on the border. Across the street is R6.
Right.
It's R5 on this side, but it's next door to a manufacturing facility.
Sure, but the trucks still drive down or up Day Hill
It's a much
Road.
wider street.
Right.
Day Hill Road is a wide street. It's,
McDonald Avenue is wider than...
no, but you have the train in the middle.
Trains are-
It's
Oh,
a
you have the
small,
track.
I
Very, very
wish,
narrow.
we would love to do that, but you can't. You would block the whole road if you had anything come there.
If I may interrupt, please comment as on a side note. As a parent, before I became the administrator in the school, I had children when they were still in nursery, and a lot of times I would have to drop them off at the same time the buses were, at that time the buses were only going on, I think they still are only on McDonald Avenue, and there was no room to squeeze through another small little car on the side. It's impossible to drive. Once the
Because of
truck, the bus is there, it's impossible to drive through. So it's a really, really narrow street, the McDonald Avenue side.
I see, okay. And then, can you also talk about the neighbors' comments about catering in the high school? If it's in the high school?
If I may first answer the question regarding the garbage, it's just that garbage has a foul smell doesn't make a difference where it's coming from. It's just the nature of garbage, especially in the summer. It will have a foul smell. I suffered from it as well. A lot of times if I'd be going outside, passing the gate, there's garbage over there, yes. But what I really wanted to mention, that we was talking about furniture. We don't throw out furniture. It doesn't happen. I mean, if you want to say we have a catering hall and you want to say a lot of things, you could say a lot of things. Catering halls don't throw out furniture. It doesn't happen. But what the question regarding the catering hall is as follows. We have, as we mentioned, two buildings. We have 600 McDonald, which is currently under discussion, as the commission pointed out. And then there's, on the other side, is another building at 317 Dale Road. Each of the buildings have their own kitchens. The 600 McDonald caters for the preschool through elementary up to 8th grade, while the kitchen on the 317 Dale Road, which the neighbors are referring to, caters for the high school division. What does happen sometimes, he's mentioning weddings. We do have students that can't afford, or for others from our camp or from our school, sometimes we will make weddings for them. And these are the weddings over the school functions. This is what he's probably referring to. And there will be music. The musicians unloading, the photographer might be coming in. These things will be happening. They're going to be coming in from 317 Day Hill Road. He was saying that he has pictures from McDonald Avenue. What happens is that since these events, school events, we'll call them, they take place early. The musician might come early afternoon at 4 o'clock, which is when dismissal and everything happens on McDonald Avenue. We don't want them intermingling with the girls, especially the younger ones that are leaving. Please use the Day Hill Road side, which is why they use that side of the building.
but, you know, so just to be clear, you have a high school, right? And it's in a residential district, right? So actually catering is not allowed as a use in a residential district in a school.
I wouldn't
And if it's
call it a catering.
wedding,
I wouldn't really
For
call
high
it
school?
catering. It's a school kitchen that sometimes will have, maybe cook a little more portions for a, for a
it's
student.
hard to make the connection between a high school student and the wedding part.
A high school student getting married.
It's a graduate of the school, I'm
Correct.
assuming, otherwise.
Right, otherwise we don't do.
Subjects, yeah.
What is the median age of the girls getting married?
Median age of girls getting married in our school, usually they graduate, I would say, by 17 and a half, by 18 in that area. They're probably married with a child already by 20, so.
Okay, 20, so it's a 20-year-old, it's not high school.
20-year-old that has a child already.
I don't want to talk about how they.
They're getting married by 19.
They're getting
So,
married.
they're getting, so
Within-
they're
within-
getting
within a
married,
year, they're
so they're
married.
19, they're graduated, they're already out of the high school. They're alum, right? That's
Right.
nice. But what you're doing is you're providing alumni, you're providing an activity for no longer high school students. You can't actually say that's a high school activity. You need to be careful because that is in fact a violation of zoning regulations. Okay? Just letting you know, I know that's not before us, but I'm telling you. And so we can't be having elementary school students also who are alum getting married because that's a nice thing for the school to be doing for its alum.
But then again, as you
right?
mentioned before, that if you want to put a no catering on the C of O to make our neighbors happier,
Okay, got that.
okay?
Is there any connection between those two buildings? Physical connection?
There's an elevator that runs right in between the two buildings.
And services both buildings?
Not necessarily, really, it's really supposed to only service the 317 Dale Road. It's part of the 317 Dale Road building. But what happens is that that has a rear exit, not meant to be used, but it's there just in case someone has to cross the building, and it's not used on a regular fashion.
So there is a connection between the two buildings, and one can pass through both buildings.
Theoretically.
I would strongly suggest that you cease catering operations in the school, in the high school, because potentially it does affect the building that we are talking about now. You have a connection between the two buildings. You can pass through from one to the other. Okay?
Thank you.
Also, can you want to talk about the structural?
Yeah, we'll get a structural.
Actually, Commissioner Montanez had brought it up, that it had been her observation that there were some horizontal cracking in the existing building, and that the addition of two floors might be compromised, and she was wondering if any structural
There will be.
engineering had been done on this.
There will be, and if the board would like, I can have a structural report done now for the next submission.
And, you know, the reason that that's relevant is one of the issues about the aesthetics, for example. You're sort of right now stuck with this building onto which you're adding. The design of the building, if it turns out this building can't handle 2 additional floors without doing really poor quality, lightweight construction, you know, that would sort of change your design opportunities, right? And it might really improve the layout of the school.
Right, we're going to call in a structural and bring in a report for the next submission.
Okay, all right. Okay, great. All the speakers who have spoken already have spoken. Sorry. And, okay, so we need...
20, do me a favor, because Yom Tov, the holidays
Yes.
are coming. 20, let's go for the hearing date on the 28th.
On the what?
28th of October.
Oh, 28th of October, okay. But when could you submit? I know.
I'm going to submit much earlier. I'm going to try and submit right away.
Okay.
But the problem with...
Yeah, no, I totally understand that, but you have an architect who has to be working on some designs. You
We'll
haven't
get
hired one
that.
yet. Right?
We'll put them to work right away.
Okay,
They're busting out of their building. They need the space, so we're
Okay.
going to...
Okay, we can set the hearing date for the 28th, but the submission has to be by the 14th of October, so I don't know
Fine.
whether you can make that with the holidays.
The biggest holiday is Sukkot, and that's what takes out a chunk. Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, when you take out a day or 2 days.
I already have, an opposition, sorry. Yeah, sorry. Take it back. So if there's the 14th for your submission, then the 21st for opposition submission. Is that,
Your Honor, is it possible to have it the following week after October 28th, the first week of November?
to have the hearing on the
Correct.
first week of November? Can we do
Yes.
that?
We don't have
Okay.
a hearing in
Oh, the first hearing is the 18th of November.
Of November?
Mhm.
We'll have a trial. I have a trial starting in Supreme Court, Kings County, November 17th. I don't know if there's another date in November.
No, but then that pushes it off too much for them. You can't make your submission on the 21st of October?
I can, the problem was the hearing date that my client wanted to be
And your client can't be here for
on October
the...
28th.
On October 28th.
What day of the week is that? It's
The Tuesday. It's always Tuesday.
No, not the 28th, I can't. I have something.
Is that the only date in November?
Well, it's the only date in October is the 28th, but to allow enough time for submissions. And otherwise, the only date in October is the 18th, and the
All
next
right.
one is the...
So I'll leave it October 28th then. Because I
Okay,
I can
October
be there on
28th. Okay, so the October 28th will be the hearing date, and your submission date on the 14th, and opposition on the 21st. Okay?
Sure, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There's one to my right.
She's tired.
Calvin, you're up.
What?
I said, Lexi, you're tired of hungry too.
No, not hungry.
Champions.
There you go. I had 11%. Yes.
Ready? Please take your seats.
Does not seat
The next one's a hard copy.
Yes, you did. Okay, we ready?
Okay, new cases.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Madam Chair.
New cases, item number 12, 343-12BZ, 570 East 21st Street, Brooklyn, Ackerman Center.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Welcome, Commissioners. My name is Calvin Wong with the firm Ackerman LLP, here on behalf of the Brooklyn School for Medically Frail Children. This is an application for a variance to permit within an R12/R7A split zoning district the construction of a Use Group 3 school and a Use Group 3 dormitory, which does not comply with the use regulations of the zoning resolution, as well as the bulk regulations pertaining to side and rear yard, lot coverage, and rear yard equivalent. Currently, there's no other school in the city that's been designed specifically to serve students with ventilation and respiratory needs. Therefore, it's not surprising that the application has received the support of Community Board 14, Councilmember Matthew Eugene, Councilmember Chaim Deutsch, Councilmember Andrew Cohen, the Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams, the Deputy Mayor for Health and Human Services, the Mayor's Office for People with Disabilities, State Assemblyman Stephen Simrowitz, and U.S. Congresswoman Yvette Clark. We attended the board's executive review session yesterday and understand that the board had a number of questions. Today we have with us here Dr. Stephen Bernardo, who is our education consultant, and Matthew Del Forte, who is our education attorney. Our project architect, Larry Knickie, was here earlier, but unfortunately had to leave, but we'll happily respond to any questions related to the design in writing in our next submission. Bernardo.
Good afternoon. I'm Stephen Bernardo. I was the superintendent for special education for the entire borough of the Bronx and went on to be a superintendent for 17 years after that. I was the senior superintendent in Orange County and have been on the faculty of a number of universities in special education. I was contacted about 2 years ago to help design a school, the educational program for a school, specifically associated with children who had respiratory needs, who were significantly impaired, but many of whom were not in the city. They were in far reaches, in New Jersey, in Albany, far from the city, which violated not only federal law, but violated the entire principle of special education. There had been a state education department and health department review of these students and found that a school was necessary. Before we came to you, we did a number of things to make sure that this presentation not only met your needs, but frankly, more importantly, met the needs of the children. We've met with the State Education Department, Assistant Commissioners of Special Education, Assistant Commissioner for School District Affairs, Assistant Commissioner of Facilities Planning, Assistant Commissioner for Technology, because we want this school building to be a 21st century school building that meets the needs of children today and tomorrow. Our intention is to move children out of inappropriate settings because they may be in hospitals, not receiving an appropriate education, or they're certainly far from the city. There is no school of this type in the city. Our goal is to move children from a patient mentality to a student mentality. To do that will be extraordinarily difficult. That's the evidence is, that's why there's no other school like it. We needed to put together a partnership of a medical facility nearby, of a service center nearby. They could all be brought together in a confluence of events to make this all possible, both professionally and financially. That's why one does not exist now. We have now found that exact mix. We're ready to move forward. We've done extraordinary research. We provided our booklets to the Department of Buildings as well as the State Education Department. We've met with the City Department of Education to alert them to the development of this program. They have no handle on exactly how many children are in these circumstances because the way the New York City School District is divided, there are 32 different committees on special education. So we'll be meeting with those 32 committees, letting them know that we're available once the school building is built. We've looked at that school building totally in terms of the needs of the two sets of students. One will be residential and one will be day school students. The entire design was thought of in terms of trying to make this school look like any other school. For example, the elevator that we've designed will be painted like a school bus, so that when a child gets out of their vehicle that will be delivering them, and they get on the elevator, they're in a school bus. The rooms, some of the rooms will have one-way mirrors, so that parents can see the service pattern going on. Presently, these children have been, aside from them being compromised physically, they've been compromised socially. Parents have to travel sometimes tens of hours to get to see their children. They can go once a week or once a month. They have to take time off from work. I have a parent here who used to have to take 1 day a week off from work just to visit her child. Bringing siblings became impossible. These children have been denied not only their legal requirement, but their moral requirement. The educational program of the school will look like nothing other than a regular track for a high school diploma. The only thing that will be different, the only thing, was where we need to intervene medically with physical therapy, speech therapy, occupational therapy, or other kinds of developmental disabilities will take place. Those children will receive the kind of special education we all think of. But other than that one issue, we intend to look at these children as high school diploma eligible. We'll use the New York State curriculum. I'm licensed in general ed, bilingual ed, and special education. So I know what these kids need. I know what these kids are going to get. The entire reason for variances is because we've identified changing the building so it meets their needs. We've looked at this as a horizontal access so that there's as little movement as possible of the children, rather than a vertical access. We even designed a round table so that the vehicles that come in can drop off every child underneath an awning, irrespective of the weather. So we've looked at many things, we've met with many people, and we're now ready to present to you in the hope that you'll see that this is an important asset for the city of New York. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairperson and Commissioners.
My name is Matthew Del Forte. I am an education law attorney. I do things like create schools and do a tremendous amount of work in the special education field in particular. I'm an attorney at Shevitz, Burr & Cohen and Del Forte, and we are an education law firm, and I run the education practice. I'm here to testify today for two reasons. One, to explain the legal nature of the school, because I understand there's some question about that, as well as to discuss the critical need for it. As you heard from Dr. Bernardo, this is truly an extraordinary school that we're building. It will serve children with severe disabilities, children who all have respiratory care needs, and many of whom will be ventilated for all or a portion of the school day. As to the legal nature of the school itself, it's an education corporation, which is the corporate form that the Board of Regents in the state of New York wants schools in New York State to take. There's all sorts of different corporations, as you know, and when you go and you create a typical corporation, not-for-profit or for-profit, you go to the Secretary of State and you submit a certificate of incorporation. Well, that doesn't happen when you go to create a school. What happens is you petition the regents. And that's significant because there's a initial review process that is undertaken by the State Education Department in connection with this petition for what's called a charter. The charter is the corporate document synonymous with a certificate of incorporation. And in particular, the State Education Department's Office of Counsel, as well as whichever program offices have responsibility for the type of school you're creating, they do a fiscal and programmatic and legal look to make sure that the school is a viable school. Because the regents don't want to put their imprimatur on it until they understand that this is a real school. That's what happened here. There's, to the extent that there was any question about whether it's a school, there shouldn't be, because the regents created it. So the other piece to why it's so important to, or relevant that the regents have created it, I said more generally that they want to, they put their imprimatur on it, but specifically that whole process, that review, is to ensure that the school is deemed worthy of recognition and encouragement by the regents. And so, again, that's happened here. We are a school, we exist. As to the need for this particular school, I guess the best evidence of it is that there's no place like it. There's a tremendous need, in fact, as you heard Dr. Bernardo testify. Children with disabilities, every child is entitled under federal and state law to a free and appropriate education. And it's the school district's Committee on Special Education's responsibility to determine what's appropriate. They go through a process, and it's different for each individual child based on that child's needs. In the case of these children, their needs are so significant that unfortunately the placements that are made are out of state or in upstate New York, hundreds of miles away. That in and of itself is in contradistinction to the law, because a part of the special education law requires that these children are educated in the least restrictive environment. The least restrictive environment means, or a component of it means, that they're educated as close to home as possible. Because the last thing we want to have happen is for a child to be ripped from their family and from their community. Unfortunately, unless a child is hospital bound inappropriately, because there's no other step-down facility, and therefore taking the resources of the community up by taking a hospital bed that maybe isn't necessary, they're sent out of state or upstate where there are facilities. Now, the express public policy of the state of New York and the state education department in particular is to repatriate these kids. That's what we're here to do. So I won't, I know you've been here a long time today, and I won't speak for too much longer, but I want to just reiterate that we have put a tremendous amount of work up to this point in going to the various stakeholders and the state education department and city education department to make sure that they're on board and they've expressed their support. And so I thank you again for your time, and we look forward to filling this great need that the city does have for these kids.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioners, I understand yesterday there was a question about the number of classrooms, and in my extemporaneous comments I didn't address that, and I apologize. I want to be clear, this is a school like no other school. You can't think of it as 8:40 to 3, and you can't think of it as classrooms. You have to think of it as the individualized instruction for each child. On occasion, instruction will take place right at the bed. On occasion, instruction will take place as part of a therapeutic session. And on occasion, it will be small groups. So that there's the internal design of the school building, which is being developed along with the state education department, will include flexibility in terms of walls, flexibility in terms of the movement of students. So the definition of a classroom is the definition of the school building. We're looking at the school building as an entire day of education. Every aspect of that day is an educational part of that child's progress. I wanted to be clear about that, and I apologize for leaving that out.
Do you have an example of this kind of a school somewhere in the country, someplace that we could use as a basic model?
There are schools like this. There's one in Westchester that comes close to this. It has much more of a hospital-type environment, and we're trying to move away from that hospital-type environment more towards an educational environment. To my knowledge, there is nothing really close by that says to parents, this is still your child, this is still a child who deserves an education, and we're here to provide the education, being cognizant of the medical circumstances. But I'm not aware of anything quite like what we're doing. Just as one example, the HVAC system has to be particularly consistent with children's needs. Even the lighting in the school, has to be sensitive to overstimulation. The paint colors need to be considered. There's just the width of the hallways needs to be consideration. There's just so many different things that we're going to be making sure about that I really can't identify a particular place. One more point. The reason we met with the technology assistant commissioner at the State Department is we want this school to be able to have interaction with Maimonides Hospital doctors that can remotely give us information or remotely provide insight. We want our school to be an educational institution for them as well as making it possible for parents to be interactive on days they can't make it and they'd like to. So I can't quite respond to your question, but I can tell you this will be a school of the future in every sense of the word.
But you're saying throughout the United States?
I'm not aware of it.
Can you look into that?
Certainly.
Because it's hard to believe really that there's not another one like this. I'm aware, just because we looked online, that there's day programs like this. And how are those different than this? Why can this not be a day program?
Well, one of the things we're looking at is trying to move students who may well be now residential, giving them an opportunity to move towards a day school environment, as well as when day school students sometimes regress, they're able to stay in the same facility but utilize one of the beds in the residential setting. So we're looking at this as an entire continuum of service, from day school through residential, from residential through day school.
So in your description, you really need more from Dr. Bernardo about the expert analysis. So normally what we're used to seeing is an expert report where the expert actually says, these are the programmatic requirements of the school. This is who the target group is, and these are the kinds of things that the students need, and being very specific about the amount of area for each type, and how many students there are in this case, and why there are so many bedrooms versus the size of the classrooms. all of that kind of thing needs to be codified into an expert report that explains to us why the school looks the way it does, because it doesn't frankly look like a school, right? And so if there's other examples of schools that are sort of day programs, and where there are apparently, well, then how is this one different, and why does this one have an overnight component or a full-time component? Also, where do the children come from who are going to this school?
The children are from the city of New York. I mean, that will be our target population. The way the city Department of Education works is they determine, the school doesn't determine who can come to the school. The city Department of Education has an obligation to evaluate children and make a placement. Right now, their placements have all been outside the city because there is no in New York City opportunity for placements. We certainly can do all of that for you, Chair. I'm sorry that we haven't done it adequately to this point, but that information is available to us.
I may be able to answer that a little bit more fully as well. So the short answer is there are residential schools. Those exist. There's quite a number of them. However, how those are different from this particular residential school is this is the only one we're aware of that will deal with that population of children who've been expatriated or placed upstate for the sole reason that they require ventilation or significant respiratory care, because there's no facility that provides that here. Those facilities exist elsewhere. Now, there's no facility that I'm aware of that's dedicated exclusively to that. There's schools for kids with severe disabilities, and as a ancillary need of some of those children, there are respiratory issues. And so you might find a school, for example, in upstate New York or Massachusetts, where there's a small population of children on ventilators for all or part of the school day as a smaller part of the overall population of that school. Our concern, the city's concern, the state's concern, frankly, has been where those kids are ours, where those kids are from the city. It's important, I think, to understand it just in 60 seconds or less, that when the Committee on Special Education makes a determination of what's appropriate, they're required to find a school that's been approved. There has been no school that's been approved because right as Dr. Bernardo said, the confluence of circumstances and resources haven't come together here in the city to accommodate those children, to serve those children. And so that's what we're here to do, and we can provide you with similar types of schools doing similar things, but the distinction is that nobody does it here, and we will focus almost as a subspecialty on those kids who require ventilation, because those are the kids who are most often expatriated.
Okay.
I hope that helps.
Something further to add? Because
No,
we're going to open up. Are there people from the, oh, sorry, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I had a question about day students and where their loading and unloading is going to occur. Is that within the building?
That's within the building. If you take a look at the cellar plan, there's a turnaround. It's a platform which actually rotates to facilitate easy access in and out of the...
So you're assuming that all the students will be transported by some sort of bus, basically? Nobody will be coming with parents driving them?
No, I can't imagine
because
that.
of the equipment that they
I
need
can't
to travel
imagine
with.
that.
Mhm. Okay.
And
That's why we designed that kind of round table.
I see it.
Do you know sort of how the flow is actually going to work? One of my concerns was that you might start to back up on 21st Street, right? So if I've got a couple of buses, how long does it take to get in, do that turnaround, offload? Am I going to start to see some traffic? I was there the other day, and I think also that Commissioner Otley Brown had experienced just being on the street of having some traffic issues.
It's not an illegitimate concern. The issue, though, is you can't look at the school as 8:40 to 3. Kids will be coming at perhaps different times, first of all. And second of all, we think there'll be very few children on a particular vehicle. 2 children, 3 children. So the offloading will be much quicker than you normally think of as a school bus. It'll be much quicker. We also have designed the program around having someone at the location, at the round table, so that a child will be assisted getting off. It won't be a child helping themselves off a vehicle. And the driver will be part of that. So I think it'll be much quicker than you could possibly envision at this moment. And the round table will get the bus right back outside. So I don't think that will happen.
But we'll provide additional information.
Yeah, we can do that.
I also had a question about that. The floor plans that we have so far don't show any kitchen facility.
The food service pattern will be, pardon me, will be provided by Ditmas Park. Food may be heated at the Brooklyn School, but Ditmas Park will create the food services that are needed. Remember, it's at least 3 meals. So using the school facility didn't make sense. Using a proximate facility that had a history of food services made the most sense.
But there's also kind of a tiny prep area.
Just a preparation area, that's all it
But
needs.
it's tiny, that I guess goes to part of the expert programming report, like how is it that the prep area is that little to service so many people? And then the other is that I assume that the caregivers are going to be staying overnight here.
They will not. There will be 3 shifts of approximately
So, but where do the caregivers like hang out?
We have a lounge. We have a lounge both for parents and a lounge for staff. And just going back to food services, to give you an insight into this, in many cases, we will need speech teachers to assist in the actual food service. Some people don't understand that speech teachers really train children how to chew and how to eat. So there's a lot of medical concerns that are being done through an educational environment.
Right. If you could include all of that in your report.
Certainly.
Anybody else? Is there anybody from the public who'd like to speak on this?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
yes.
Please get up and state your
yes.
name, and you have 3 minutes
How are you?
each.
I have requested 10 minutes if possible.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, okay. I hope I don't need it.
Good.
Uh,
I didn't know.
My name is Ray Peebles. I'm a resident architect at Ditmas Park, and I'm representing the Ditmas Park East Association. Now, we have, from the beginning, had some problems with this particular project. We think it's a good cause, but we think the project should be rejected and canceled immediately. And that's a harsh statement, but because it does not comply with the zoning resolution in the building code. Now, the inception of this project was from when we first heard of it was at the city plan, at the community planning board almost 2 years ago, which the applicant applied for a variance under the classification of a school as a right. And then all of a sudden it morphed into a dormitory, and then now it's a bona fide nursing home. Now, how do I make that statement? I have a little advantage in this respect. The community and I have been working for that 1.5, almost 2 years to find out why this building is here. And we located from the New York State Department of Hospitals and Health a certificate of need for this particular project. Now, as you know, the expert on determining what a hospital is the New York State Department of Hospitals. And they do not give out certificate of needs to schools. And we were very aware of the design of this building. And let's say, for example, we have 6 architects that live in Ditmas Park. And this is the first time I ever heard of 6 architects agreeing on the same thing. And we do. One of the things that is required when you have a certificate of need is for the applicant to file an application with the New York City Department of City Planning. And regardless of what residential district you're in. And that comes under section 2242 of the zoning resolution. And also, if you're in an R1 zone, you require a special permit from city planning. And that's where this project should be. I'll just give you an example. Say, for example, the Board of Education owned this building, or my grandmother. It's still being used as a hospital. And because, how do I know? Because they tell me so, and they're the experts. There's no greater expert in the New York State Department of Health and Hospital, because that's what they do all the time. Without that certificate of need, you cannot operate a hospital. Now, and in particular, I sent in a package the other day that gave some information and some of the parts of the, we call a certificate of need. And I too was confused at first, and what is this type of building? Now, if you look at that certificate of need, it will explain certain things. This is basically a hospital, because some of the patients here are really dependent, ventilation dependent. Some of them have trach, they can't be moved around. They also explain in the certificate of need that the main purpose of this, because, and this it was a political thing. Cuomo saw that most of the kids in this condition, unfortunately, were going out of state to different, because there's no facilities for them. And the hospitals, like Maimonides, and it's stated, I'm not making it, you can see it when you take a glance at the certificate of need, was saying that we have at least 2 patients a week that come out of acute ICU units that are costing the government a tremendous amount of money, and it would be a better place to have a nursing home that would provide a longer-term care. Now, these particular rooms and designs that you have here, and if you look, as you compare the certificate of need with the facts and findings, and take out the word school, just have a clear, you will see that they match in equipment, they match in concept, they match in the number of rooms, they match in location. And that's what this is. Now, there's also a statement in the certificate of need that they want these kids to be educated. But that's individually educated, just like he said, they come to the bedside and they were taught, I mean, let's put it this way. We breathe normally without the help of machines. You can't have a kid studying for over 24 hours or over 14 minutes, 15 minutes. You have to go in there when the kid is breathing well. And unfortunately, it's not just a matter of oxygen, it's a matter of the machine, the ventilator machine actually helps you to breathe. It's not just a lack of oxygen. And that's why it's classified as a hospital. And not only is it a hospital, you know, and unfortunately it is an intensive care unit, but it's not an acute intensive care unit. Everything in there is exactly if you ever, anyone, unfortunately, if anyone had to visit a friend in an intensive care unit, you will see the very same things here. And in this case also, it is required to have a pumped-in oxygen. I don't know, there's various systems you can use, but mostly they use oxygen tanks, compressed oxygen tanks, because if the energy goes out, you can still use them. Because these kids without oxygen for a while, depending on their condition at the time, they'll no longer be with us. Now, in particular, they call it. I'm quoting out of the CON, the certificate of need. They call it pediatric ventilator dependent beds. They name the same amount of beds and that we do. Now, also there's treatments, therapy, so forth, and which puts it in the category group use group 3 and use group 4, and respectively. And then also it comes under the category of the zoning definition of what the hospital is. And I printed it out totally. I won't read it totally, but let me just read the first part of it. And this is the classification. And as everyone here knows, you cannot do any zoning or anything unless you have the proper classification on a building. That's the first thing. You can't even do a use group unless you have a classification. And the classification is, on a use group institution says, the occupancy, I'm just going to read a short paragraph. The occupancy shall include buildings and structures used for medical, surgical, psychiatric, and nursing or personal care, on a 24-hour basis or overnight. More than 2 children under the age of 2, or more than 3 persons who are not capable of self-preservation and not capable of responding to emergency situations without physical assistance. And from staff, physical assistance from staff. This group shall include but not limited to, and it gives a whole list of things. And the choice that the New York Department of Health selected was nursing home. And so I have no reason to doubt them, especially of the design that they have come up with. Now, I believe between the statement of facts, the definition of the building code, and the fact that you have a confirmation that you have a certificate of need, which is very difficult to get, by the way. Why would you give a certificate of need to a school? Now, they mentioned that they're certified by the Board of Regents. That's a program. That's like anything else when you do development. You always have a conditional situation. You have a program without a facility. Okay? If you find a facility that meets that program, you approve it, you're up and operating. Okay, now, in this case, it was a little confusing at first until I was able to do some research along with some of the people in the community. But there's one thing that puzzles me. And this is what I'm saying now. I mean, what I previously said is very technical. In other words, I have numbers down so you can quickly check the zoning and also the building code. But what was bothering me about this project was the location. You know, they always say in real estate, location. I didn't think it applied to this type of facility. But what I find is that they make reference into one of the 5 requirements in terms of ability to be granted hardship, is that for some reason the location of this building to nursing home, to existing nursing home, is of paramount importance. And from what I know and from what I read in the certificate of need, this building is supposed to be designed for pediatric care. And if you know anything about pediatric care, you do not have other physicians that are not pediatricians work on somebody who is under a certain age, because they're different inside. So there's a specialty. So for...
Can you wrap up because your 10 minutes is up?
Yes, okay. But the things that... thank you very much. For them to say that this location is important because it's adjacent or contiguous to that nursing home is ridiculous, because this facility has more ability to take care of these kids than the nursing home. The nursing home don't have those skills. This has a 24-hour. Well, if you read, I don't want to take any long. There's something. If you read into this, you will see that mystery and that fog of confusion will disappear. And I thank you very much for your time.
I just have 2 questions for you.
Yes.
First is, would a boarding school be a school? Where kids stay overnight and they're educated during the daytime in classrooms?
Provided it did not, provided it didn't meet the...
No, I'm just asking, I'm just saying, a place where kids stay overnight and there are classrooms in the building, would that be a school?
Yeah.
Okay. And is it inconceivable to you, totally inconceivable, that there are children who are so incapacitated that they need to live in sort of some kind of a dormitory situation where they're hooked up to significant amounts of equipment so that they can go to school? Is that inconceivable?
And that's what you call a nursing home.
No, I'm
No,
talking
what-
about children who are not in a normal, they're in a they're in a boarding school, but the difference between those children in the boarding school and, say, children in some fancy boarding school in Connecticut is that they have significant physical difficulties and they need to be hooked up to a lot of stuff in order to survive.
No, I wouldn't consider the school, and neither does the Department of Health, because what I'm just, that's why they called it this. I mean.
Okay, no, that was just my question.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Somebody else would like to speak?
Yes. All right, good afternoon. I'm Attorney Stephen Jones on behalf of the residents of Ditmas Park East. I have, 3 minutes? I'll try to make it brief. Forgive me if I go over. First, thank you all for your time. We were here at the meeting just on yesterday, and we're trying to address some of those questions. But I want to emphasize, if there's one thing that you take away from my commentary, is this. Please read the certificate of need in detail, because what you're seeing now is not what was originally represented as the facility that's proposed currently. If you look at the certificate of need, it states specifically that this was supposed to be basically an expansion of a current Ditmas Park Rehabilitation Center. There was very little discussion of any type of school or any type of need for pediatric care. In fact, on page 4 of said certificate of need, they state that although there is no specific need methodology for pediatric ventilator beds, the Department of Health has indicated its support for pediatric ventilator units to facilitate the discharge of patients from acute care facilities. This is their words. These are their words, okay? Now, because they've run into a problem, they want to change it up and say, well, it's a school so they could go under the Cornell doctrine. We encourage you all to read all the documents that we submitted, because we don't oppose the education of these students with these types of needs. We don't oppose that. We oppose the location of it. And if you allow this type of facility to be in this location, then we're just throwing the New York City zoning laws, to the wind. They're laws for a reason. They're zoning laws for a reason. And this area is zoned as R12 specifically. Now, Commissioner Perlmutter, you stated earlier, you asked a very legitimate question regarding facilities that were similar to this in the New York area. Yes, there are some. Blythedale, all right? I believe it's out in Valhalla, which is Westchester. And they provide, their expertise and resources are providing medically frail children with best opportunities to maximize their potential to return to their families. They are nationally known for their ventilator weaning program due to their success in weaning infants and children from ventilators and technology needed to sustain their lives, just like what's being proposed here. But they're honest about who they are. They're a hospital, and they have an educational component. In fact, they state specifically that they have a partnership with the Pleasantdale-Blythedale Union Free School District so that they provide classes and education for the students that are there. But they still determine that they classify themselves as a hospital, right? So here we're trying to say, well, because we have classes, at least the applicant is trying to say, because we have classes, that we're somehow a school. That's not the truth. If you put a television in your bathroom, that doesn't mean it's your living room.
Could I just ask a question, because you did state that you are representing people who are objecting to this type of facility at
Yes,
this
ma'am.
location, but could you tell me why? That's what I want to know. Why is it that you object to this type of facility there?
Thank you. I know my time is up, if I might answer that question and continue. If you look at what you all mentioned yesterday, specifically regarding the traffic that you experienced, some of you might have experienced, there is no facility there now, but you got stuck, right? You got stuck. Imagine the impact of a 40-car garage or 40-car facility trying to bring these students in, buses, ambulances, trying to come in. It's going to have a negative impact on the community. And in some of the plans, I know they've changed the plans significantly several times. Some of the plans, they have some type of excavation project such that they're trying to dig underneath the ground to build this facility. It's going to have a negative impact on the adjacent homes in that facility. In that area, this is a residential R12 area. And if you look at these types of students or patients or whatever, the children more specifically, These patients have a high likelihood of multi-drug resistant bacteria. In other words, they struggle with being chronically infected or dealing with infections, requiring that medical waste be appropriately disposed of. You can't do that in an R12 area. You have to have the right facility. You would have to take over that area to be able to get rid of those that waste properly. I'm not saying it's impossible, but we're talking about converting the character of a community, right, to address the needs of this facility. But the fact of the matter is that, again, we're not opposed to it, but just build it in the right area where they can receive the necessary resources to dispose of the medical waste, to deal with the potential traffic congestion, versus dealing with the fact that just, from your visit, you're looking at a potential traffic jam where the cars are going to be backing up on Ocean Avenue, right, which is a major thoroughfare, potentially causing accidents and just a number of different things. I mean, so you got to look at if you look at how they came forward regarding their request for variances under 7221. One of the findings that you have to decide is whether 7221C specifically, whether this is going to have a major impact on the community. I mean, and I can't see how this board, in good faith, not saying that you guys are doing anything wrong, but in good faith, after your experience, can say that this won't have any impact on the community. At the very least, we're requesting that an independent investigator, expert, go out and investigate what exactly this facility is going to look like, the impact on the community. We're recommending the Department of Transportation, Department of Environmental Protection, because all of these agencies have to be a part of this decision to say, okay, this is what we're looking at, right? Not the variances are granted and down the road it's like, wow, we wish we would have changed our application because now it's destroying the community. We need to know up front. And they're not being, no disrespect to the applicant, they have a goal, but being transparent. We just want transparency in terms of what it is they're asking for. And their documents are stating something different than what they're saying to you all now. So we're just hoping that you all take a close look at these documents and review them. We're not saying that there isn't a need or these kids shouldn't receive this type of education. We're just saying that you have to comply with the New York City zoning resolution. That's what we're saying.
Question for you. Are
Yes.
you aware that there are doctor's offices in R1s and
Yes.
R2s and R3s?
Yes.
Have you ever gone to a doctor's office? And
Yes.
have they ever done a blood test or
Yes.
anything else like that?
Yes.
So don't those blood tests have to be transported in proper isolation devices?
Of course.
Right?
Of course, but you compare a doctor's office with a medical facility in which you're having 40 cars and buses
No, I'm not
bringing
talking about
children.
the buses. I'm
but
talking about the medical, what you're calling the medical waste. I'm just talking about that.
exactly. But what I'm saying is that the patients in these facilities, these children, these young children, like I stated earlier, are going to be struggling with chronic infections potentially because of their respiratory issues.
But I mean, when you go to a doctor's office, aren't you sick?
That's true, or I might just go for a checkup. Versus a child or a student or an adult, because they did in their certificate of need, they contemplated adults as well, having chronic issues that need to be addressed. That's the distinction, and I don't want that to be lost on the board. I'm encouraging you all to take a look at these documents and scrutinize what they're saying, because they're coming at us from different angles because they're not being transparent. And again, we're not against the project. We're just against the location, and we're just encouraging them to find a location on the other side, the R7 side, build up if they need to, right? And have all the facilities that they need and not violate New York City zoning law.
Okay.
Bottom line.
Very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Someone else like to speak on this? We all want to speak. Go ahead.
I'm Dick Ocean. I'm representing the Dippers Park Association. I'm here essentially to support the first two people. I've got a letter I'd like to read and just make a couple of quick comments. I think this was originally, it's been presented to you as a school. I think we've talked about that already. I'll just read this. This is, as representatives of the Dippers Park Association, we're requesting that the BSA reject the application for non-compliance with the use group regulations governing the proposed site. Dippers Park is an area east of Ocean Avenue, west of 16th Street, from Newkirk to Dorchester on the north. The entire neighborhood, with the exception of the east side of Ocean Avenue, which is where the project is located, is a New York City landmark district. Like the proposed site, virtually all of Dippers Park is on R12. A presentation for this project has been made for CB 14's public hearing in January 2013, where again it was presented as a school for medically frail children, which would be an as-of-right use. The community board approved the application presented. However, a review of the documents, if you look at the plans, which I'm sure you have, the proposed building really is not so much a school, but the physical structure looks like a nursing home or a health-related facility, which is not a permitted use. The Dippins Park Association isn't alone in reaching this conclusion. The certificate of need that was issued by the New York State Department of Health confirms it, and they list the primary use and occupancy as, quote, pediatric ventilator unit. And the Department of Health program review section states that the facility will have, quote, an interdisciplinary team led by a pediatric pulmonologist that will provide care, including nutrition and feeding, medical management, sensory stimulation, respiratory, physical, occupational therapy, and assessment development. And a social worker will work with the families to address their needs. The certificate of need also goes on to mention that educational services will be offered. Because the children in the facility require 24-hour care, they're not capable of self-preservation. It seems the occupancy group should be listed as institutional rather than educational, which is what is stated on the Department of Buildings application. Certainly, the construction of a facility for medically frail children to live in care is a laudable goal, and the DPA board is sympathetic and supportive. However, the description of the project of the school seems inaccurate. It's actually a nursing home, which requires a special permit that can only be granted by the City Planning Commission. Given the inconsistencies and errors and contradictions in the application, the Dippins Park Association believes the application should be withdrawn, revised, and refiled with the City Planning Commission and the Department of Buildings as a nursing home and a healthcare facility. And I'd just like to add, personally, that I'm not against the proposal as much as the form that's being applied. Essentially, it's the same point. I think it needs to go to the City Planning Commission.
Thank you. Next person?
So, good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Evelyn, actually Dr. Evelyn W. Castro, and I live 4 doors from the proposed project. It's very interesting to me that the group before us, that means I live on Ocean, but my backyard is on 21st Street. And the group before us just talked about what happens when what goes out at the backyard of a facility. So in terms of the quality of life, the density, things that would happen around our block. Most of my neighbors here, many of them are physicians. I'm a PhD, all right? And there are 25 private homes on that block. That's what we are, all right? I've been there for over 30 years, planned to live there, got the house, and really want to keep the quality of life for my children and my grandchildren. Having said that, I also was superintendent of schools for that area, Crown Heights, Flatbush, District 17. All due respect to Dr. Bernardo, but there are 32 districts, and all of the superintendents know each other. Carmen Farina was my next door neighbor at PS6 when I was principal of the Hunter College Campus School for 7 years. I was also director of early childhood for the New York City Public Schools and put in place all-day kindergarten. So I know about special needs children. They are my passion. They are part of my work. My PhD was in gifted education, which includes special ed. This is a for-profit school. The concept that the children will come from New York City is true, but they will come when New York City pays for them, each child for about $55,000 a child, all right? There are communities in New York, District 2, District 21, who have a straight track into getting private education. One of my parents at Hunter, Neil Rosenberg, was an advocate for this. So what we want is this to exist, but in the proper place. Contiguous to our block, the Diocese of New York, the Catholic Diocese, has buildings that are empty school buildings, if in fact. You asked a question about boarding schools. This is not a boarding school. There are therapeutic schools that are more like hospitals. So I think we have to think really clearly about this and where it is situated and what it's really going to do. We're talking about 3 shifts of people who will work there. We're talking about digging down 4 or 5 levels below our houses, all right? Each of us has probably a very huge lot, and there are doctors on the block. Dr. Byers is here, there are several of them, but people come in and go out, and there are little canisters for medical waste. It's not a lot. This is a totally different situation. The Board of Regents, which I have been on the Governor's Advisory, I'm a constituent of Yvette Clark, a constituent of Eric Adams, who are not in favor of this project because it was misrepresented. So I'm asking your consideration to take into account all of us who have invested our lives in a community in Dittman's Park and really invested many things professionally as well as personally in keeping that environment. We would work tirelessly to help this school exist or this hospital exist, but it has to be done in the correct way. There was no consultation with the community, with us at all. No chance for us to weigh in with our expertise and our passion, because certainly these children deserve a place, but it has to be done not for profit, but for the true values of what this is supposed to be about. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else want to?
Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Harold Byer. I bring to you about 40 years of medical practice. I think that's the school you were looking for, one of the schools. But his name was cool. It's called the hospital. It's 3 pages actually.
Oh, that's one.
You can,
One first.
okay? That exists as we speak. I have never, I hope you all were listening intently. Because if you listen to these 2 gentlemen, they have presented the entire case as they wanted you to see it. They said we've contacted, we've interacted with all of the stakeholders. Did you hear community? Or did you hear medicine or medical state? Nothing medical, nothing community. That's all the stakeholders. So they're going to construct this facility in the midst of a community that is primarily a medical facility without ever consulting with New York State, New York City, medical, or with the community. Strange. I can go right now and take one of those, what do you call it, daycare centers, and I can get a teaching permit from New York State. This is a medical facility. Okay? I am in sympathy with building a facility for those medically frail children. I'm a gynecologist, 40 years. And I have delivered many of them with cerebral palsy, Down syndrome, you name it. And some of them are severely affected. Some of them cannot feed themselves. They cannot do the average things that we do every day. And they need to be taken care of. And I said before that I would lend my ability as a physician, as a volunteer, as I do throughout my area right now. I would volunteer to help them in the facility, to even help the search. As Dr. Castro said, she proposed facilities that are available that will not be intrusive on any area. I hate to come here or to come any place because, see, I went to downstate and I trained at Kings County and downstate and was at Brookdale and Brooklyn and Long Island College Hospital and downstate and Kings County, and I delivered about 4,000 babies over that time. And I don't make distinctions. But if you stand here and you start to look around, you'll see what we hit. One group of people saying one thing and another group saying it. That creates divisions. I think if you want to institute something, talk to everybody. Let's get a consensus, and then you institute it. That's not being done. I'm going to read a little bit and I'm going to get off. Okay? Reading on the sign, this is something I had all my people saying.
If you could paraphrase this, because
yes, okay. Reading on the sign, we're in agreement with the proposed with the institution. We want it to succeed, but it must go through the requisite assessments, whereby we can continuous conflict thereby. Okay, without such due diligence, however, one or more party become aggrieved, thus leading to continuous conflict, thereby leading to an unhealthy distraction from the potential merits of the project itself. We, however, remain committed and undeterred in our effort to assist them in making sure a project. However, this is the wrong place and the wrong project at this time, because you have old people, some of whom are here. Everybody in that neighborhood now at retirement age. We're on fixed incomes, and we have our own chronic diseases. Everybody got diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease, everything, Alzheimer's and whatever, and they need medication, and they don't need to be excavated right next to my home, 3 feet from my home. They're going to excavate.
Okay.
And they're going to very deep in the ground, and my ground still is just ready to crack, and the mice and everything that's coming out. I can't live like that.
Okay, thank you very
One second.
much.
In my
3 minutes is
yes,
up. It's
okay, but in that neighborhood, nobody else won't talk. In my neighborhood, and right there, you have people who've done so much for the society, and they live right there. You will never know as you drive there who've done what. And then we have people to invade us. Unnatural, unheard. Thank you very much for your time.
Anyone else?
Good afternoon to the board. My name is Audrey Jones. I had no intentions of speaking this afternoon. But considering what has been presented to the board, I think as a registered nurse and as an owner of a property like 4 feet from the location where they plan to build this alleged school, I think I should make my voice be heard. First, I want to say to the board that as a mother and as a registered nurse, I have no objection where this project is concerned, except it's in the wrong location. And the transparency of this application has been null and void. There hasn't been any transparency. I spoke with the applicant some time ago, and I made a remark to him. I said, please, as a community, let us know what you plan to build on this site, and let us decide whether we want it here or not. They continue to say it is a school. As a nurse, and with decades of nursing experience under my belt, I've worked in different areas of nursing, and I know that this is not a school because of the type of population. And Commissioner Perlmutter, you asked a question, which I think was very relevant. You said if there's a school, a boarding, if I'm wrong, correct me, a school with a boarding facility, would that be considered a school? Was that the question you asked? And yes, it would be considered a school, but with this school, the type of medical equipment that will be housed in this facility 24/7, because these patients are 24/7 dependent on ventilators and on oxygen. You take it away from them and they croak on you. They turn blue. So this is the difference between a dormitory and a pediatric nursing home, and that's what this is. And I wish the applicant would be more transparent and say, this is what we are building with an educational component. Please, I'm asking the board to review the documents that we have sent in. Please, especially that CON from the Department of Health, because it's a vital document that gives permission for ventilator beds and for hospital beds. And if you review that document thoroughly, you will decide and you will come up with the right decision. Is this a school or is this a long-term pediatric nursing home? Thank you all and God bless.
Hi, I'm Sandra, as a resident of Ocean Avenue, and
what's your last name?
Sandra Aline, and it will be right next door to where I reside. And as a cancer survivor, who's still on medication, I'm really scared because I feel it will affect me because it would happen right next door. The building, digging and all that is right next door. And that's my concern as a resident, okay? It's been really cool so far, but this is scaring me, all right? Thanks for listening.
Anyone else?
Good afternoon, Board. My name is Stephanie Hampton. I'm speaking on behalf of, again, my mother who just presented to you. Long and short, I just want to touch on a couple of elements. As reiterated, I would like to reiterate what was stated earlier as it relates to the zoning. It's not zoned, this facility is not zoned for this location. It is going to impact the character of the neighborhood negatively. The character of the neighborhood, as we talked about earlier, it's a historical neighborhood. These homes have been around for centuries, and these homes have such, speak to the resilience of, you know, the people who built the homes, maintain the homes, live in the homes, have had families in these homes. You know, to put a facility of this nature in that environment would be detrimental. The traffic, it's bad enough reversing out of our homes as it is because Ocean Avenue is a major thoroughfare. To add additional traffic to that to add additional traffic to that thoroughfare would negatively impact our ability to get even out of our homes. I mean, it's difficult as it is already, but to add more traffic would be a negative situation for us. We talked about the trash, you know, as you were saying, as the other individual stated earlier, the trash is going to be a huge issue for us as well, because unlike a doctor's office, this facility is going to be producing a large amount of medical waste that we feel that that's not appropriate for that environment. And lastly, you know, at the end of the day, this is a pediatric prescribed extended care facility with an educational component, which is not zoned for this location. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? The applicant like to respond?
Yes. First of all, there's no dispute that there's an accessory medical component to this application. At no point have we changed the amount of medical care that these students are receiving. And it's not the Department of, and all medical care in New York State is under the purview of the Department of Health. However, when it comes to use group classification, it's the Department of City Planning, it's the Department of Buildings that are charged with determining and classifying use groups in the city of New York. We've consulted with both of these agencies prior to and during this process. In fact, that's why we had to amend our application to include a waiver for the dormitory use. No changes, no significant changes were made to our plans with the addition of that waiver. It was just after consultation with the Department of Buildings that they said that we believe that this is classified as a dormitory use. Additionally, it should be noted when talking about the character of the community, we can construct a use group, an as-of-right use group 3 school on the R12 portion of the site that would look almost exactly the same as the frontage that we're proposing. It would be a few feet shorter or narrower in width, and it would have to provide a rear yard that would separate it from the R7 portion of the site. However, in terms of bulk, in terms of construction methodology, it's very similar to what we're proposing. Additionally, we could also construct a 6-story medical facility, a larger medical facility on the R7 portion of the site, same sort of parking configuration, additional parking spaces with greater pedestrian and vehicular traffic. Instead, we've designed a program that not only meets the programmatic needs of the school in that it's a lower squatter building in order to be able to transport students easily of this nature, you want fewer floors. You want larger floor plates. And so that's why we're requesting the rear yard and rear yard equivalent waivers. We could go with a we could construct additional floor area on the R7 portion, but we don't want to because it would be more difficult for the students.
Just let me ask you a question. You mentioned that you had had discussions with the building department and with city planning. Did you discuss 2242 with city planning?
Yes, we discussed them. We spoke to Beth Leibowitz, and we also met with Thomas Ferriero, and we presented these plans. We presented that binder documenting our program, and they came to the determination this is the appropriate use group. To respond to Blythedale Hospital. Blythedale Hospital is a pediatric hospital for students, or for children who want to be weaned from ventilators. I agree, and they provide education. However, no students are going to Blythedale for education. Here you have 21 beds for a student population of approximately 50 students. You have 29 students who are coming to this facility daily. 29, that's 58% of the student population doesn't live there. They're coming here only for education. And that's what separates us from a hospital. That's what separates us from a nursing home.
And who's actually going to be doing the teaching? Who is the educational facility?
We've actually already
State your name
chosen...
for the record, Doctor.
Oh, Dr. Stephen Bernardo, thanks. We've already chosen a principal who was a former superintendent for Brooklyn for special education and the deputy superintendent in Bridgeport, Connecticut. The teachers will all have state certification. Every therapist will have state certification under the state education department. Every single professional staff member dealing with the students, and their students, not patients. And that's how we want to think of them. At Blythedale, they're patients who get some education. They do not get a full day of education. They're under the homebound school law, which is much less education. I've been to Blythedale. Blythedale very often wants children to leave and has no place to send them. When I was a superintendent, I visited Blythedale on behalf of parents who did not have another place to send their children. So these are students who had been patients. They are not continuing to be patients. That is not our frame of reference. But every single staff member will be certified under state education department regulation and law.
Can you also speak about the certificate of need? Like, how does that fit into this story?
The certificate of need is a process that, frankly, I'm not expert in, but I can tell you this. Every institution goes through all kinds of certifications in order to be determined to be a legitimate institution.
But normally a school doesn't obviously need a certificate of need, right?
No, but we'll go through federal certifications. We're not a federal school.
No, but specifically, does someone
Let me
else know about the
say.
certificate of need with respect to this location, this use?
You know more. The certificate of need, Matthew Delforty, isn't dispositive or determinative of whether or not it's a school. It's my understanding that a certificate of need is a document that gives a particular facility the right to have the residential bed. But we're a school, and
No, just speak about the certificate of need. What's a certificate of need for? Why did you get
it's
it,
for
et
the
cetera,
it's
et
for the
cetera?
beds specifically.
It's for the beds. So you do need a certificate of need for the 21 beds, right?
I believe so. It shows a need for the beds.
Okay.
And that's, I'm sorry, and that's because of the equipment that's used for, in other words, if I just were going to have a regular dormitory with children that were perhaps not compromised, I'm not going to get a certificate of need. I'm going to get a certificate of need because I have children that are compromised in some way and have to have some medical assistance.
They require that
in there.
ventilation and respiratory care.
Yes.
But we'll address that in our next mission as well.
Okay, that's good. And what's the number of staff that you have proposed for this? I know you have shifts. What's the...
Well, there's two kinds of staff. Remember, there's the overnight staff, and then there's the educational program medical staff as well. In the way the Department of Education under federal law works is they determine the staffing ratio on a child-by-child basis. So when you develop the educational plan, called the IEP, when you develop that plan, the Department of Education determines what the group size is, what the number of therapists will be required, depending upon the number of students. So that's really dependent upon the New York City Department of Education determinations.
But doesn't your regent's approval, didn't that get into how many teachers that you're going to have and all of that sort of stuff? I mean, what did you submit when you said you were going to have school here? What did they ask you?
We gave there's a long litany of things that they require that speak to the nature of the educational program, description of the curriculum, the ratio that we will, or that we anticipate serving, teacher-student age ratio. It doesn't require you, when you go to obtain a charter, to state specifically that information as of yet, because you still are in the development of your program. There'll be a second round when we go back to the State Education Department to receive the funding itself for the educational part of the school day.
So for the EAS though, how did they project the number of trips that would be necessary? How did you determine how many parking spaces that you needed if you didn't know the quantity of staff and cars, et cetera?
Well, we, to some degree, you're analyzing previous history. You're analyzing the set of services associated with a particular set of children. But again, the school cannot determine what services specifically any one child needs. That's up to the New York City Department of Education. It is our best estimate based upon our history of 50 children.
So really, you're going to need to amend the statement of finding facts to explain how you arrived at the population count, how you determined how many parking spaces, and then the EAS has to be revised to reflect that so that we understand what the traffic impacts are and, you know, where the buses go, do they park on the street, how it's going to deal with the parking, the traffic conditions that the community has described. That very much needs to be included in the report. The expert aspect of this really needs to be beefed up enormously. Okay. Do you have other questions? No? Thanks
I
very
just want to clarify a couple of points, if I may. One of our neighbors indicated that the Board of Regents has, quote, certified a program. That's not accurate. The Board of Regents has issued a charter, which is a not-for-profit education corporation. I mean, there was another statement by another neighbor who indicated this was a for-profit institution, which it is not. By definition, an education corporation under the Education Law, Section 216, about which describes how charters are issued, they are statutorily not-for-profit. So I think it's important to clarify.
There was a point made that we hadn't consulted with medical providers. There's been enormous analysis with medical providers, including some of the motivation for this program came from Maimonides Hospital itself, who told us that they have children staying in their facility who are not getting an appropriate education because they're being educated under the homebound law rather than under the special education law, and do not need the level and intensity of a medical care facility, but there's simply no place else to keep them. So consultation with medical providers, and indeed, 2 doctors from Maimonides came to the Community Board Land Use Committee to make presentations on our behalf. The Land Use Committee voted in our favor following that, and the Community Board voted overwhelmingly. And I had been on a community board, and I know how hard it is to get that. So Maimonides is deeply involved in this discussion.
Okay.
But that's just because the materials aren't clear, so you need to make
Well,
sure.
we'll clarify that in our next submission.
Right. How much time do you need to do all of this?
We have a lot of the information already. I mean, I think the only thing we might have to do is just revise the EAS with regard to the traffic pattern. So I'd like to submit it October 7th.
October 7th, okay.
If we can come back on the 21st.
That's fine. Fine with everybody? Okay. Opposition. I'm sorry. Does opposition want to submit something in response to?
Yes.
Okay. So October 7th for the applicant submission and October 14th for opposition submission, and the hearing will be on the 21st.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can we make that the 28th, not the 21st? Yeah, there's a lot happening. Let's make that the 28th for the hearing date, okay?
In that case,
So-
I'm sorry.
So
Might we push
yours,
back
the submission date to the 14th?
Yeah.
And opposition on the 21st? It only gives, the problem is it only gives us a week to read what is probably going to be very complicated.
Sure, then we'll
So I'm hoping it's complicated because I really want it to be an expert report, okay? So, so let's just keep it, your submission on the 7th,
right? Is that what you said? Opposition submission on the 14th, and the hearing on the 28th.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you.
Should I call the next case, Madam Chair?
Yes, thank you. Item number 13, 8-14 BZ, 1824 East 22nd Street, Brooklyn.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Good evening.
I thought they're not supposed to do this.
Okay, in a moment for the noise. All right, Lyra J. Altman from the law office of Lyra J. Altman, representing the Sayevskis. And we did a 10-year executive session yesterday and heard your concerns. I'd like to first address the, I'd say, smaller comments from Commissioner Hingston. I know you had a question regarding a landscaping plan. We will, of course, submit that. We apologize for not submitting that previously. Regarding the garage, of course, we will add a note saying that it's subject to DOB approval. And that extra parking space was actually an error. There was debate at one point as to whether they were going to have a parking space or a garage. You see on the zoning analysis form, it shows only one parking space. That's because there's only supposed to be the garage. They're going through removing the parking pad. We apologize for that oversight. So those were the three little things on the plan. Next, I know there was a question regarding the rear yard. There was a concern about how this was going to affect the donut. So what I did, let's put in these a little lip on it. What I did was I pulled up some images to show what the block looks like. And as you see, the piece that's highlighted is our property. I apologize, I only have one copy right now. But this is the same block, and you will see that the vast majority, this is just give you two different views of the block. One is obviously a cleaner view, just showing you the outlines, and one is, of course, an aerial view so you can see them in reality. What you will see is of the 47 properties on that block, 33 of them, 70%, actually have garages that already are in the rear yard affecting the donut. So this enlargement will not negatively impact what is happening to the donut on this block. And interestingly enough, the garage is including the house immediately to the left. So it's not going to have a negative impact on the area. It's not going to stick into what is otherwise an open space in the donut, as you see in many areas of, let's say, Manhattan.
When you say immediately to the left, you're saying immediately to, well, your site is this square one, right? So immediately north, there's no garage, immediately.
To the left, on the south, all those properties have garages backing up to us.
But those are arguably not the donut, because those are.
But as you see on that block,
right,
there really is no meaningful donut on that block. As you would see in most areas of Manhattan, it's open all the way through.
But the properties immediately to the rear of your property don't have garages. And to the north of your property, if that's north,
That's
also doesn't
a
have
total of
garage.
3 properties on a block of 47 properties.
But if you're talking about the immediate impact on the immediate neighbors, none of them have garages in the back.
I will point out also that if you were to look at the aerial map, you will see that there is actually something in the rear of this property. It is not shown on there. I do not know why, but you can see it on the aerial, and you can also see it on our existing plan. There are 2 sheds on the property currently. You see it on our existing plan.
The subject property, there are sheds.
That is correct. So there's already something protruding into the quote-unquote donut on this site. Those sheds
It's
will actually...
one shed that you want to convert to the garage.
That is correct. And the other is being removed in its entirety.
Existing garage, there's also a shed, is that what you're saying?
That is correct.
So, but that's only 1 story, right? It's not...
Correct, but it
2
also goes all the way to
stories
the
and
rear
attic.
lot line. This doesn't go to the rear lot line. This provides 20-foot space. As was contemplated, what they did when they created this 73622 special permit is they were looking for a way to keep these families in the city. As you know, many people in this area have larger families, and they were having to leave the city because they couldn't provide the kind of space that they required for these families. And what they said was, okay, we want to give space. How do we do this and have the least impact on the character? And the thought was, if you took this space and you put the massing towards the back, that would have the least impact on the character of the area.
Okay.
So if you notice, the special permit does not allow you to touch the front yard. The front yard is sacrosanct, not a debate. You are permitted to do a straight line extension of the 2 pre-existing non-complying side yards, assuming they are pre-existing non-complying, or of course you provide what is required. And the rear, they permit you to go to a 20-foot rear yard. As I said, the thought process was that it would have the least impact on the general character of the neighborhood.
Right, okay.
So that is why we are proposing to add that space there. That is what was contemplated when this section was passed. In addition, I did an analysis, and this I do have copies. A bunch of copies of this. This was the floor area ratio analysis that I had submitted to your board with the notice of comments, and I expanded on it. This is the information I was able to obtain last night. I do apologize I don't have all the information because, of course, I didn't have access to your records last night after the executive session. But what I was able to provide is on 3 of the properties. I was able to confirm they are 2 stories plus an attic, which is what we're proposing. 1, which is the only one I was able to obtain a height for, is 36 feet in height. We are proposing 35 feet in height, 1 foot shorter. The rear yards of the 7 properties, only 3 have required rear yards. The other 4, of course, are corner lots, which are not the same zoning, effectively. And these were approved by BSA, 20 feet 2 inches, 20 feet, and 24 feet, well in line with the 20 feet we are requesting. As far as the lot coverages that were approved by this board, again, 46, 46, and 43.7. The others I don't have lot coverages for, but this should give you a feel, and I should point out, I only point out the number of open violations as 0 on the non-BSA applications, because of course if they are BSA applications, we know that they were approved legally. It's the ones that were built without a BSA approval I wanted to confirm were legally built. So as you see...
Well, let's say they didn't get a violation, that doesn't mean they were legally built.
Well, I was showing you what was approved by BSA.
Right.
So if I'm showing you what was approved by BSA, that is legal.
Right.
Whether they did something illegal in the field, we're not using that to look at these houses.
But the 3 that don't have open violations, that doesn't mean that they were built pursuant to permits, that just means that the DOB didn't.
I will tell you that according to the DOB website, I see no indication